so. I think a few of my neighbors are in here.
Call the meeting to order for the November 14, 2017 study session. Madam Clerk, roll call, please.
The record will reflect that all members of council are present.
Thank you. Please silence in the audience, please. Any questions on the consent calendar from the dais? Seeing none, we have a presentation given to us for recognition to OC Books on the Run. Do we have a speaker present?
So what we're going to do tonight is recognize three women who are in our local high schools who have started a charity called OC Books on the Run. And we'll let them give a little bit of a presentation, but I'd like to start out by simply saying it is a real honor sometimes to be able to recognize people who are volunteers up here. And it's even better when they're young people who continue to give us a sustained hope for the future, because what they are doing is they're donating books to 4 different charities: Girls Inc., City of Hope Hospital, Casa Teresa, Someone Cares, Soup Kitchen. And in fact, they recently surpassed over 1,000 books donated to these 4 charities. And we put out the call at the city council level for folks to donate. And tonight we're going to be donating over 150 more books. And if you would like to follow up with them and donate your own books, I suspect, looking out in the audience, there are a few of you who may have some surplus books somewhere in your house. You can go to ocbooksontherun.com. So before I present a certificate, ladies, would you like to say anything? Yep.
Hi everyone, we're OC Books on the Run, and we're a charity that collects books and donates them around our community to promote literacy. So we started this organization because we all spent a lot of time volunteering at our local library since 6th or 7th grade, and we noticed that we all have a lot of books lying around in our houses. And we decided we could get together and form an organization and donate them to charities who would need these books.
Yes, also adding on to the organizations that we donate to, we've been starting to donate to City of Hope and Oasis Senior Center, and we're hoping to start donating to other more organizations.
And then since we reached our goal of 1,000 books, we've changed it to 2,000 books, and this will help us a lot. And then we've also applied for a grant to expand our outreach that we can do for other charities, basically.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
Ladies, please head over to the flags. Take a picture with Councilman O'Neill. Thank you, Councilman O'Neill. Next up, item 3, we have a staff update on harbor operations. Is that item pulled? General plan, excuse me, I skipped one. That may have been subconscious, actually. All right, next we have a general plan update, or staff update in the general plan. Staff?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and City Council members. I'm Simone Georges. I'm the Community Development Director. We're really excited to share our thoughts on a possible process for the general plan update. And I always want to highlight that these types of projects, it is a process. What we're going to present to you this evening is really just a basic framework of what we envision, what staff envisions would be a process going forward. Love to hear your input after the presentation and take your recommendations. I'm going to hand it over to Jim Campbell, and I'm really excited that Jim Campbell is our new Deputy Community Development Director. He went through a rigorous recruitment process, so we're really happy to introduce Jim as our new Deputy Director. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you, Simone. Mayor Muldoon and members of the City Council, I first want to thank you and Simone and Mr. Kiff for providing the opportunity to present this important item to the community. I want to start off by just explaining a little bit of the background. What is the general plan for the audience and for everyone? I want to start again that it is the community's vision, establishes that. It provides for the long-range blueprint for development of the community. It provides, we have 10 elements here in Newport Beach. 6 of them are state mandated, as you can see on the graph there. The dark blue ones are the state mandated items, and the lighter ones are the ones that we have done optionally. As I indicated, it is the benchmark for guiding development in the community. It provides the policy basis for all zoning and land use regulations, and it supports parts of our capital improvement program. So we're embarking upon a comprehensive general plan update, and the first question in my mind was, why are we doing this? Well, the last update was in 2006, and the state of California encourages periodic review and updating where necessary. So we would start by reviewing the general plan and then going through a process, engaging with the public to update it potentially. So other reasons to do this, we have changes in state planning law. A whole variety of new requirements have been enacted over the years since 2006 that we might want to look at and reflect in our new general plan. Now, the additional item is that the community vision may have changed, and so we would want to engage the community and look at the vision and make updates where necessary. What would the process look like? This is a basic slide that depicts the overview of the update process. Now, I want to kind of stress the largest box in the middle there, community and stakeholder input, and that's really what's going to drive this entire process. The components that go within the general plan are really going to be hashed out in that central box there. So it starts here today with the appointment of the steering committees and the general plan advisory committees. We'll hire a consultant, go through that outreach program, create draft policies and initiatives, perform the analysis that's necessary on that, develop alternatives, and then present them back to the community. So the first recommendation that we have, and this is reflected on the evening's agenda as well, is to establish a steering committee and a general plan advisory committee. That would help guide the process. The recommendation for the steering committee would be a 3-person committee. In fact, we're recommending Council members O'Neill and Herdman and former Mayor Nancy Gardner to be on that committee. And their basic role would be to advise the General Plan Advisory Committee. They would review their RFP, their request for proposals for consultants, and assist staff in managing the overall process. They would also be reviewing applications for the General Plan Advisory Committee membership. Moving on to the General Plan Advisory Committee, this would be a fairly large committee. It could be anywhere from 9 to almost 30 people. It would be comprised of residents and property owners, commissioners, and community groups. And so this committee would provide the forum for which the public would provide input and public discussion of the various issues that the general plan involves. How will this all work? This is a graphic depiction of the relationships of these 3 bodies. So the community is the biggest cog. This is where all the input comes in, and it would be reviewed by the General Plan Advisory Committee, and the steering committee would be advising the General Plan Advisory Committee. And then they would also report back to the City Council for direction if necessary. Staff and the consultants will be providing support and services for the entire process throughout the entire time period. But we do envision in using a consultant, several consultants possibly, a team of consultants. But initially what we would do is put out a request for proposals for a planning consultant. The steering committee, as I mentioned, would review those proposals, they would conduct interviews, and then they would provide a recommendation to the city council for approval. So the consultant's responsibilities principally would be to activate the community outreach effort. They would be facilitating the community workshops, envisioning and doing surveys to the community and preparing the draft updates and goals, technical reports so that the public can review them and digest them and provide meaningful input to the process. They'll also be doing the required analysis, environmental analysis, fiscal analysis, and the like, so that we can have the baseline information to make an informed decision. They'll also be doing the environmental impact report. Civic engagement, in our opinion, is really the most important component of this, and our approach is to do an open and transparent process, and so that middle box there, or circle, is really the centerpiece of this, where residents and community groups and stakeholders can come together and discuss the various issues that face the city. So the plan preparation. As you can see, community outreach is stretched across the entire graph here, but we would be looking for community input, visioning, workshop surveys throughout the process. So we developed the plan, looking at land use, circulation, safety, and other elements. In essence, we recommend that we look at the entire general plan, all the elements. Some might be amended more than others, and others might just need a simple refresh. We'll be also looking at potential alternatives and to various different policies that are coming out of the General Plan Advisory Committee process. So in that, there'll be kind of an iterative process. We'll start to analyze that. What are the ramifications of it, the environmental effects, the market and fiscal impacts as well, so that we can make an informed decision. And out of that process will come a plan or a recommendation, and that we'll be bringing that forward to hearings with the various committees and commissions that the city has, and ultimately coming to the City Council for review. So the goals. One of the first steps in the process is to review where we are. In 2006, we had a variety of goals and policies, and how are we doing? Are we close to meeting any of those goals? Has the community vision changed, and what emerging trends that need to be examined? And I've got a list of emerging ideas here. This isn't a limiting list, and obviously we can add things in the process through the community input and the General Plan Advisory Committee. There'll be other issues that'll be added to this that we'll be discussing and addressing through policy as necessary. So what about development standards? Scale of development seems to be a hot issue these days, so we might be looking at that. Environmental justice is a topic the state of California requires that we evaluate when we amend 2 elements or more. Protection of private views, and again, this list here is a very simple list, but this list will expand and contract depending upon what the community really wants to do. What about other issues? Banning Ranch, airport area, the Newport Center, Mariners Mile. Again, this is, these areas need to be looked at. We're hearing a lot of community feedback that maybe these areas, we might want to change our vision in these areas. We don't know what the answers to that will be, but this process will provide a debate to look at these areas. And again, this isn't a limiting list of areas. In fact, it probably will be expanded, but these are kind of the hot areas that we see today. What's the goal? Well, the goal is to update, first review, and then update the general plan to reflect the community's changing vision. We do expect this to have about a 2040 timeframe, a 20-year planning horizon, which is very similar to our current general plan. We're about 10 years into our existing general plan, and so now's the time to evaluate it. But if we do make this kind of a comprehensive update, we'll be probably extending that out to about 2040. The anticipated timeline. So today we're looking at us initiating the amendment. We're asking the council to do that on the evening's agenda. We're also asking on the evening agenda to establish the committees, as I noted. So we'll be going forward and getting the contract for the consultants and doing the community engagement, as I said, going through and reviewing the policies and going through and developing new ones. Obviously the public review and commission hearings, as I indicated, with an anticipated timeline of ending the process in the middle of 2020. So that is really my presentation today, but on this slide I want to kind of emphasize the 2 items here. We've got this general plan update at newportbeachca.gov, so that's an email address. So if anyone emails that address, it'll go into a box. I'll get it, Simone will get it, my staff will get it, And we'll start to address questions that come up throughout the process, so that's going to be available to the community. Obviously, they can contact us directly. And we have a website up right now. It doesn't have a lot of information on there, but it will be a portal that will be used to post the various technical reports, agendas, staff reports, the environmental impact report, draft plans, and the like. And so that's going to be one of our primary tools to provide information to the public. And then we'll be providing a lot more content as we go forward through the process. So that's really my presentation for this afternoon, and Simone and I are available for any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Campbell. I'll have a couple questions. Since we have an audience here that's likely interested in this topic, do you have some of the slides, or are there any slides available for the item 18 in the regular calendar, the same correlating item? Specifically, do you have any visual slides about the composition of the citizen board or that project schedule you provide?
I can pull up, I'm going to need to pull up the actual resolution for tonight's meeting here. Give me a couple moments and I'll be able to pull that up.
Take your time.
You know what? I don't have access to the network from here.
That's okay.
Sorry.
What I can do is I can sort of relay some of these to those in the audience in case others here present or some viewing are not aware of some of the details. The General Plan Advisory Committee essentially is going to be made up of approximately or up to 3 residents from each of the city council districts. So as you may be aware, we have 7 districts, each of us elected to that district, and there'll be 3 representatives from each district. They'll be looking out for the local issues that matter much to them. So in the case of District 4, my district, I believe that residents who are very active in Newport Beach tennis club or high school issues would be especially interested. Other residents, perhaps surrounding Mariner's Mile, would be interested in being involved in that representation in a different district. So you could see how that setup would be beneficial to those who are involved. There'll be 1 member from the Planning Commission, 1 member from the Finance Committee, 1 member from the Harbor Commission, 1 member from Parks, Beach, and Recreation, and members from local community organizations who have a extreme interest in this. And I say extreme because I can tell by those who are present today that there are some residents who this is their most important issue to them, and we want to give those residents a voice. When it comes to the actual steering committee, I'm very honored that former Mayor Nancy Garner agreed to be on that committee. My plan would be for Ms. Garner to essentially be the liaison between the steering committee and the General Plan Advisory Committee, to chair the General Plan Advisory Committee, and to help develop a consensus, which is my segue into the other aspect that I was hoping to address a little bit. Could you go back to the timeline you do provide? It has very similar dates to what the staff report.
Okay, it's up. And I do have the resolution up on another screen if we can.
Now, when you look at this anticipated timeline, this is not etched in stone. This is a timeline that allows an opportunity for you to see how long the process will be, but it's very important to note that we are not in a rush. This is something that we want buy-in and consensus from the community. We want complete transparency. We want deliberate, thoughtful consideration, respecting of other opinions, balancing of projects or no projects in specific areas. Like, for example, if you want to protect the zoning at St. James, that may be something that is a specific area that is dedicated to no growth at all, or to keeping the aesthetic and culture of our community. This essential timeline we're providing is so that we have an idea about how long the process goes. And if the process makes it on the ballot for 2020 because there's consensus, then that's something that we hope the people of Newport Beach will vote to support. But if there's not a consensus or there's more work to be done, then we will prolong that process. What we really want is we don't want a repeat of failed initiatives in the past. And we don't want the residents to feel that they don't have control over their own city's destiny. In conversations with Mr. Kiff, and perhaps Mr. Kiff, you can chime in as far as how to offer more flexibility to the project schedule, without making it stale or risk losing any funds that we dedicate to the project scale. And specifically, I'm talking about 18-5 in the staff report. Perhaps you could share your thoughts to the dais and the crowd about how you think we can ensure that the process is thorough and not rushed.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. To me, the thing that gets stale is potentially the environmental review document, and that if you provide that is near the end of the process, whatever length of the process is, then I think you've assured that the community input is not only reflected in the document, but the document itself is still live and viable by the time this goes to the voters before the council.
Thank you. And so we'll be voting on that later this evening as far as the resolution and the schedule goes, and perhaps by motion we'll make that clear that flexibility is offered. But I just wanted the audience to know before we take public comment, based on concerned emails that I had received prior and what I've heard, that this process is not going to be rushed, and we need community buy-in, otherwise there's no point to this at all. Any other questions or comments from the dais before we go out to the public? See none. Public speakers, please step forward. Public comments on the study session item. And there's only one podium available this evening, so please feel free to state your name for the record and approach the podium on your right.
I'm Nancy Gardner, and thank you for your confidence that you have shown in this process. I just want to thank the council because I think that there's been a huge step forward in this process, and the commitment to the community involvement that you have shown is going to make all the difference in how we proceed in the end product. So thank you very much for that generous stretch of asking about what our residents think.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
My name is Dennis Baker, Mayor Muldoon and Council. I have a question that's probably for staff, even though I'm addressing it to you. The 2006 general plan had a great number of tables and numerics associated with it, and I was wondering if staff could tell everybody the status. I guess my question is this: is all the data, all the numbers, because over the many years there's been changes and so on and so forth, is all the data and all the numbers that are in the past general plan up to date? Because as Jim mentioned, one of the processes is to review what has gone before us. Thank you.
Thank you, and I'll direct them to answer that question after the public comment section.
Mayor Muldoon, members of the council, my name is Jim Mosier. And following on that previous comment, I think at the most basic level, if we're going to set out to update the general plan, it would certainly seem wise to actually print out some copies of the current general plan so that those who are interested in changing it could know what our general plan is. To the best of my knowledge, there are no copies because some elements have been revised, some have not. If you go to the library, all you will find is the version that was approved in 2006. And if you try to look it up online where we have it, it was never designed as an electronic document. So you have a myriad of files that you have to look at on separate screens and try to put together. I think that would be a very wise first step. And if we are interested in changing it, I would observe the usual impetus why a city finds a need to change its general plan is because the assumptions that went into it, particularly regarding housing, have changed, and the city finds itself having to accommodate new state-mandated housing. And I understand from what I read on the new website online that our housing element is currently good through 2021, which is quite close to the end of this process. And I am wondering what happens if we go through all this work and effort and in 2020 or 2021 find that we have a new mandate and we have to accommodate 10,000, 30,000, who knows how many new units in our city, how this general plan is going to accomplish that. So I'm wondering if this is really the most opportune time to do that. And if we are setting out on this process and if we're not rushed, what impresses me about the presentation this afternoon is you're being presented with precisely one way to go about updating a general plan, and you're being asked to commit for these several years to this $1 million this year and I don't know how many in future years, commitment to this one method of doing it, I would humbly suggest that if we're in no rush, that at this point you don't commit to this, but instead commit to appointing a kind of blue ribbon commission, as cities would do, of citizens and business people and other stakeholders to review why we're needing to update the general plan. You've heard a position from staff. I don't know what those stakeholders might think. Seems odd to be starting the process and then asking them. To do that at the beginning, ask them what needs to be changed and what the most expeditious way of doing that would be, and only then make your decision. If this item does come back, which I guess it is tonight, I have a number of comments on the two committees that you're planning to create, and I will make those comments then. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Good afternoon. I'm Susan Skinner, and I'd like to reiterate the email I sent to all of you and also to Mr. Campbell earlier yesterday. I'm up here today to ask for absolute and total transparency in what development is added to this general plan. In 2006 and in 2014, the question that was asked, the ballot question, because this is a green light vote, implied that there would be minimal development that was added. So, for example, and Will, you asked me, I sent you back an email to explain my position. As an example, in 2006, the ballot question said, shall we add 1,166 new homes, remove 450,000 square feet of development, and remove 28,900 traffic trips from the general plan? We were asleep at the wheel. We approved that. What actually went in was 2,200 new apartments for the Airport area, 450 new apartments in Newport Center, the new PIMCO building, and thousands and thousands of new traffic trips. So this was not a transparent process. When 2014 came around, the same process was utilized, but this time we were aware of that, and that's why Measure Y went down in flames. So my question to you, I'm asking for an absolute commitment that the ballot question that will be asked, because it is a green light vote, will contain the absolute amount of new development as an independent, standalone statement for this general plan, so that the people of Newport Beach will understand fully what it is they are about to prove if they do approve it. May I ask for your commitment on that?
I'll be happy to address that topic at the end of public comments.
Be lovely. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Mayor Muldoon and members of the council, my name is Dorothy Kraus, and I'm speaking on behalf of SPAWN, of which I am vice president of the board. Mayor Muldoon, I really want to thank you and appreciate you for your, what sounds like a commitment to not rush this process, to make sure there's citizen constituent engagement and our input is considered and thought through, and for transparency. I also want to acknowledge Mr. Mosier's last comments around what I'm going to say may be putting the cart before the horse, insofar as this is a study session, and as I understand it, study sessions are to listen and solicit new ideas, and then before deciding how to proceed with the general plan, take time to thoughtfully digest and consider what you've heard. So with that said, SPAWN will like an opportunity to provide the input for you to consider for what things we would like to see changed, and consider that before launching down this single path that has been identified by staff to you tonight. SPAWN itself plans to convene a citizens group this Saturday to go over what we've heard tonight, and consider what we think needs to be changed, as I said, and how best to accomplish that. You might find that harnessing citizen power in that and similar ways is more cost-effective and will produce a better result than this single option presented to you tonight. We would certainly appreciate it if you would make no final commitment to any particular process until you have seen at least that level of grassroots input. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
My name is Elaine Lenhoff, Mayor Muldoon, council members. I was on maybe one of the first forerunners of the general plans for Newport Beach. I was involved in Newport Tomorrow back in the 70s or something like that. And since then, I have not been officially a part of the general plan process. But I did attend all the community meetings. I put my little colored things on the things that I wanted and so on. But I don't like to say this, but I have felt that it was like a feel-good thing, to make us feel good, like we really had a part, but that the result was staff and consultant-driven and did not totally reflect the wishes of the residents of the city. So I hope that this time you won't end up with any citizen feeling like their opinions were ignored. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please. Any other desires to comment on this topic before we? Yes.
Thank you. My name is David Tanner. I provided written comments to you by email this afternoon. And since I did that, I don't need to stand here and read them. But there are several topics that I wanted to talk about the scope of the general plan. I realize the general consensus today is about the process. But the scope of the general plan, I think, is important to get off on the right foot. And I wanted to share with you my vision on how I see this city evolving, particularly within the horizon year of this updated general plan. But first, as the prior speaker spoke, there have been state legislations passed last year and continuing this year. 3 state bills dealt with accessory dwelling units, and they became effective January 1st. And in August of this year, this city, and thank you for doing so, passed Ordinance 2017-11 to address those state-mandated housing requirements, and I thank you for doing that. However, since the passage of that ordinance, there have been 17 additional bills, according to my count, that have dealt with accessory dwelling units to further incentivize them and/or affordable housing. And of course, the presumption is that accessory dwelling units will be affordable, which has its pros and cons. So I would like to suggest that the City Council look at its not only updated general plan process, but its existing general plan, because it uses that in findings. So I would just ask that it look at that, and this legislation concerns me very much because many of these bills take away the authority of local cities and counties to make these land use decisions, and they mandate in this case, the development of affordable or accessory dwelling units that affect existing built-out areas. And so how are we going to project what the effectiveness of these legislations are? So I would like to have a request that the city, through this general plan process, look at this and see if they can get a handle on what's going on. And I know I've talked with other state agencies, and they're trying to get a handle because 15 of these bills were passed in September, and 2 more were passed in October. So the state is just trying to meet this 1 million to 1.5 million unit housing shortage they perceive, and the shortage in affordable housing through this passage of these bills. So other things I would like to bring up are in the general plan process, new technologies. We're going to see a lot. We're in a rapid period of evolution, and what their effects might be within the general plan horizon year. At 2040, as staff has said, we're likely to have autonomous vehicles. Teslas are very close to that right now. We're likely to have the commercial use of drones. It's not legal yet, but within the horizon year, we're likely to have it. It's in test cases now. These new technologies will revolutionize. Thank you very much. You've got my comments in writing.
Thank you, Mr. Tanner. Any other comments on this item?
Mr. Mayor, my name is Alan Beek, and I'm old-fashioned, and I hope that $2 million has been estimated as way too generous and we don't spend half that much.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good evening, Mayor Muldoon and council members. My name is Peggy Palmer. I'm with the Coalition to Protect Mariners Mile. One of our missions, we had many missions on Mariners Mile, but our main mission on Mariners Mile was to prevent the widening of Pacific Coast Highway, for which a 12-foot frontage would be taken from property owners on the north side. And just from the gentleman speaking here, I don't know how many of you have seen lately that Uber is now working with NASA for flying cars. And that is going to be spearheaded by the year 2020. So we really need to look at these transportation models, and if we have these different type of vehicles, why would we be expanding Pacific Coast Highway? We want to improve underperforming areas to retain our casual bayside character and prevent overly massive buildings that eliminate views of both the harbor and the bluff. Discourage transportation policies and traffic engineering practices which promote increased traffic volumes and speeds. Right now, Pacific Coast Highway is marked at 40 miles an hour to 45 miles an hour, and on any given day, people are going between 65 and 70 miles an hour, especially on Saturday and Sunday when they're testing their McLarens, Porsches, and race cars along that corridor. In closing, we need a clear vision guiding the transformation of Mariners Mile. Ongoing efforts will continue to be suboptimal and disappointing. We truly feel that the 2000 Mariners Mile strategic vision and design framework plan is by far a superior product that was presented by Placeworks. On behalf of the Coalition to Protect Mariners Mile, we believe our team of experts have the experience and the commitment that is necessary to establish Mariners Mile as a main street and an actual destination place to live, work, and enjoy and visit in Newport Beach. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Palmer. Next speaker, please. Any other speakers on this topic? All right, seeing none, I have a slew of questions to sort of address, but before I do, Councilman O'Neill.
So Jim, let's go through a few of the things that Jim Mosier said and a couple other folks said, which is timing and starting the process now versus continuing to move forward. So 2006, how long was the process to get to that point, to get to the vote?
Well, that process actually started far earlier than that. It started in earnest in 1999. I think it took up steam in 2000, 2001. What started that process was a general plan update committee. And this is really talking to Mr. Mosier's point. A committee was created to look at the general plan and decide, well, what do we want to do? Do we want to update it at all? And if so, what areas do we want to look at? And so that was sort of that blue ribbon committee that Mr. Mosier kind of mentioned. And the recommendations from that committee were to the City Council to update the general plan comprehensively, and then we embarked upon that in roughly 2003. And then it was about a 3-year process with a general plan advisory committee. Very similar to the process you're looking at here. So I think the difference is that there was a committee that that was in advance of this kind of a process. So again, this is very similar to what we did in 2006 without that initial update committee.
Okay. And so let's talk about that just a little bit too, because it's worth going back and remembering. So let's fast forward for a second, and then we'll come back to that process, because I think it probably makes sense to discuss that, given that it actually passed, and 14 not so much. So in 2006, we had the Blue Ribbon Committee. We then moved forward and have what was called GPUC, the General Plan Update Committee, and GPAC, the General Plan Advisory Committee. The GPUC was essentially the steering committee at that time, right?
Yeah, that was the committee that evaluated the general plan and the land use framework at that time, starting in 2001. And they took about 2 years to come back with a recommendation to council to update the general plan. And with that recommendation, the council said, hey, let's do it. And then they created the GPAC at the time. And then that led to the 2006 update, which was successfully voted on, yes.
Okay. And then I mean, I'm looking at it right now, and a few of you might remember some of these names: Leslie Daigle, Steve Rosansky, Ed Selich, Barry Eaton, Jeffrey Cole, Michael Torge, Kevin Wida, Chris Trapp, Tom Anderson, Tim Collins, Alan Beek. I mean, a few of you are sitting in the audience right now. So at that time, just to create the Blue Ribbon Committee, we had a pretty wide swath of people, including council members.
And planning commissioners.
And planning commissioners
Yeah.
and airport commissioners and folks that are out in the community.
That is a different approach that could be taken. So we again, this is going back to Mr. Mosier's comment. Do you want to create a committee that would evaluate the full scope of that and then to report back with a recommendation before we start this process? We definitely can explore that process.
Okay. And then we eventually created the GPAC, which was about, and it was, I mean, it's enormous. I couldn't possibly read it all.
Yeah, there was a large general plan advisory committee. It was 25 to 30 at times.
Dave says 37. Yeah. By the way, in case anyone actually wants to see this, all you have to do is pull up our general plan online and look at literally the first page. I guess it's the second page of acknowledgements. All right, and then so eventually it goes through GPAC, GPUC, Planning Commission, Council.
Yes, it's a very similar process to the one I outlined today. So we went through the civic engagement, if you will, visioning process. We planned development, analysis, plan alternatives. It was kind of an iterative process. It went through several committees, Planning Commission, Parks, Beaches and Recreation, Harbor Commission, and the like. And so ultimately it led to the City Council's endorsement in 2006.
And then eventually it went on the ballot.
Yes, it did. It did have increases above Charter Section 423 thresholds and required a vote.
Okay. And I have to be honest, I actually went back and looked at the ballot arguments because I was curious who wrote them and what they said. And interesting enough, again, here's some interesting folks. We've got argument in favor of it was Don Webb, Steve Rosansky, Nancy Gardner, Ed Romeo, and Seymour Beek. And arguments against it were Dick Nichols, Gene Watt, Philip Arnst, Irene Black, and Jan Vandersloot. And by the way, Gene, I've got to ask if you've ever teamed up with Dick Nichols other than that. But anyway, so, but what it's an interesting, to everyone in the audience, I would definitely recommend going back and looking at the ballot arguments in favor and opposed, simply because a lot of the same arguments that we're having now. I have to disagree with one of our speakers that the argument being that people were asleep at the switch, or in the email last night, duplicitous, simply because you look back, there's a lot of argument, and there are a lot of really educated people involved in this entire process. So I'd have to at least give them some of the benefit of the doubt in terms of the credibility and integrity of the folks who went through this entire process. But anyway, coming back around, so what about following a similar process? What about slowing it down a little bit and having some discussion out in the group? And to Spawn's point, they're bringing some folks in. We've got folks from the business ready and willing, I'm sure, to come in and talk about that. I mean, certainly we could create a similar GPOC now and move forward. And eventually, if for some reason something didn't happen, 2021 rolls around, we can look at that discrete housing element, and admittedly we'd have to look at the public safety as well. But I mean, I think Jim's point as well, if we didn't hit, if we're bumping up against that, there is a more discrete approach that can take that into a consideration, which I think would end up having to go to the voters too, but it's discrete rather than a comprehensive review. If for some reason the Blue Ribbon Committee says, no, we need to stick to the vision statement that was approved by the voters, which called it a 2025 vision statement, right? So, I mean, we're opening this thing up 8 years earlier than the voters had approved in 2006. So there has to be a really, really good reason to do so, and I'm trying to work through that right now, and admittedly myself. So I know that was a lot of information that I'm just kind of throwing out there, but I'm curious what your thoughts are.
Excuse me. We definitely can slow this down and kind of relook at this and engage the community right now to kind of look at the overall scope and scale of what we're embarking upon. You touched upon the housing element. That's sort of a 2021. We have to do a new housing element in 2021. We're going to have RENA coming out, our Regional Housing Needs Assessment, in 2020. So that's sort of an outside date where we must act on something. Before then, we really don't have to do anything. When we do the housing element, we have to do the safety element. When you do two elements, you have to do environmental justice. Now, can you do that as a discrete amendment? Probably. When you start opening the housing element, you're going to start looking at land use, and when you start looking at land use, you're looking at circulation, which when we open up circulation, the circulation element, it's going to be a completely new document. It needs to be completely rewritten, and we do intend on addressing newer technologies, autonomous vehicles and the like. So all of those issues will come forward there as we develop our streets as complete streets, and we can talk about that if you like. But again, we don't have to do anything today, and we can kind of study what we want to do and how we want to do it a little bit more thoughtfully if you like. We can engage a committee if you would like. We can bring back additional information in a study session forum where we go out to the community and meet with these folks. I mean, I'm actually willing to go Saturday to that grassroots community forum and just listen and observe and help if I can. If I were welcome, I would like to do it. I'll extend that out to the community. I'll be happy to meet with anyone if they will. But we can bring all that information back in either of those types of ways and let the council make whatever decision they want.
So Jim, what happens if we get to 2021? Well, let's assume for a moment we go through this entire process as envisioned, and we get to a point where in 2020 the voters reject it, and we have to update our housing element in 2021. What happens?
Well, we'll have to wait to see what the RENA says. If our housing needs assessment is high and we have to provide, 3,000 units within our general plan somewhere, and we don't have those areas, we're going to have to look at our land use element and our housing element and identify those sites where those units have to go.
Okay.
It'll be required. So we may end up going through this process, and depending upon the outcome of that, which we expect the RENA to come in mid-2020, possibly late 2020. And if that comes out after we've gone through this process, are we going to open it up again? We might end up doing that. So slowing this down to have the housing element really be fully reflected in this update and maybe doing it in 2021 is probably a good idea.
So, so if we went through this entire process, spent $2 million, came to a conclusion that we're only adding 1,000 units, and don't quote me, folks, but 1,000 units, and in our RENA numbers, by the way, before I keep going, would you mind explaining what RENA number is?
Certainly. It's the Regional Housing Needs Assessment, and this is where Southern California Association of Governments, in working with several other partners, the Center for Demographic Research, what they're doing is looking forward to say, hey, how many units do we need to provide, actually all the communities in Southern California, and actually statewide, we need to accommodate additional housing units. And so they provide us a number, and they break it down by income category. Our current 8-year RENA that we're working on now is 5 units. So I think we're safe. We're pretty good. Due to the recession. But as we go forward, I think our RENA will grow. The last housing element cycle, if I remember correctly, the RENA was close to 1,700 units, and we have plenty of opportunities to accommodate that. But I guess the thought is that if we start to evaluate our housing opportunities, and some of those sites may not be opportunities going forward because they haven't been redeveloped, we may not be able to account for those. And if we find ourselves with too few sites and a requirement, to have more, we're going to have to evaluate that and incorporate additional change.
Okay. So in other words, I'm just going to distill this real quick for us. The state mandates an amount of affordable housing each area has to accommodate. And in fact, most of you probably saw the state does this often. We did it. That's what the granny flat, the auxiliary dwelling unit. And by the way, remind me, how many auxiliary dwelling unit locations could there potentially be in our city after we were forced to pass that ordinance, Jim?
I don't have that number at the top of my
thousands,
head, so.
though, wasn't it? Yeah,
we will have thousands of opportunities. Yes.
Okay, so in other words, one of the concerns I've got as I'm hearing this is, out of Sacramento, we hear the words affordable housing often, and it seems that we're going to continue to see a slew of bills coming out of Sacramento that will be dictating down to the local agencies what they can and can't do. And RENA number is a really good example of that. I know Huntington Beach has struggled rather mightily with that. And so the question I've got is, let's assume we go through this entire process, we come to a conclusion that that everybody's comfortable with. But it ends up with a much lower number of affordable housing unit opportunities then we find out midway through 2020 after we've already voted on putting it on the ballot, or even late 2020 after people have voted on it. What happens then? Do we have to reopen this entire process that we just put $2 million and hundreds of hours, maybe thousands of hours of manpower into it?
I don't think that we would have to reopen the entire document at that point in time, but we may have to look at certain areas where we might need to accommodate additional housing and then conduct additional analysis of what the effects of that would be, do some additional environmental review. But yeah, we'd have to relook at that.
Okay, but I mean, if I'm hearing you correctly, if we looked at the housing element, I apologize, folks, I know I'm taking a long time up here. If we looked at the housing element, again, you're saying we have to open up the public safety element. If we open the public safety element, we open this and this and this and this, and at some point, we're doing the whole general plan update process yet again, and given the green light, we would have to put it out to the voters yet again. So I mean, we're looking at potentially two rather significant processes that we just don't know what they're going to look like, because the state of California won't tell us until 2020, when in theory we might be voting on this. Correct?
Correct. Now, one thing I would add is that the state of California is not only looking at affordable housing, they're looking at all housing opportunities, and that's just a component of it. So, yeah, our RHNA numbers and what they will be in 2020 are going to be very important to this process, and it may change this process. So,
okay, all right.
When they release those numbers, do they just release them like a surprise, or do they sort of hint that this is a couple of years is what we're going to be looking at?
There is a process. We'll be monitoring. In fact, 2 staff members went to a meeting today, so they'll be putting out draft numbers in mid-2020, and they'll be adopting the final ones we think, in late 2020. That's sort of an early timeline right now, and that might change.
Okay.
But I expect it to be in 2020, if not hopefully sooner, because a vast majority of cities in Orange County have a housing element cycle that will require them to update it in 2021.
If we shot for 2020 with some flexibility that it could go with to 2022, that could alleviate that problem.
Theoretically, yes.
What's the grace period if we do nothing and that comes up 2021? They give us a number. We haven't done any of our homework, and now we're set with starting from then. Are we rushed? Is there a certain time period we have to act within?
Well, what I would caution against is we definitely have to have a housing element in on time. We really can't be late with that, no matter what we do. If we look at this comprehensively, we should be looking at a 2.5 to 3 year process. So if we think of which is what we're looking at today. So if we're thinking of getting the RHNA numbers, we might be looking at 2021. And if we're looking at 2022 for an election, and there's no guarantee we'll even need an election, because maybe we won't have the increases that everyone might fear. Obviously we don't want the EIR to get stale, as Mr. Kiff indicated, so the analysis needs to be done at the appropriate time, not too early to where it gets stale before the vote. So we'd have to strategize, a little more closely based upon when the RHNA numbers come out, and I could anticipate bringing this forward to council in maybe 2021 comprehensively. Breaking this down into discrete pieces is going to be challenging, because, as I indicated, you open up housing, you open up safety. You open up safety, we have to do climate change, which is another issue which we have to address in this, and I failed to mention that. Environmental justice comes in, and we're hearing from the community land use is a big issue, and so that may be one of the more controversial items in circulation with Mariners Mile and the like. So there's a lot to do. And my thought is, I think it's probably best to do it comprehensively all at one time, as opposed to doing it piecemeal, if you will.
Before I go to my colleagues, I just want to answer two questions that were offered. Do we have all the data for 2006, like Mr. Baker had asked?
Yes, we do have that data. We're working on a general plan guide where we can obviously easily reflect all the transfers and different development that's occurred over the years, and we are working on that, and we will definitely have it for this process.
Thank you. And Mrs. Skinner's question about what was eliminated and what was added, essentially how it was packaged in the presentation to the people. Could you address that?
Well, certainly. I don't agree that the city hid anything at that time. I can understand the sentiment that Ms. Skinner is suggesting, but what we ended up doing is looking at all the increases in development citywide and looking at all the decreases in development citywide, and actually doing a net increase on units, square footage, and traffic. And so the numbers that were presented to the public in 2006 were solid. They were rock solid. I think the misconception is that in some areas there was an increase, but it was balanced in a different area with a decrease, and maybe that's not what they saw, or maybe that's what they felt they were voting on. So I think there may have been a misunderstanding. Clearly there was, given Ms. Skinner's comments. So my commitment, and I know Simone's commitment, and Dave Kiff's commitment, is to make this an open and transparent process so everyone completely sees all these numbers, whatever they might be.
I just want to follow up on that. As you know very well, Ms. Skinner, social media has changed so much, and I know you're a good user of Nextdoor and other venues, and I think this is a different era we're living in, where what was done in 2006, if it was not acceptable in the eyes of enough people, it wouldn't happen. And I think that I want there to be as much transparency as possible, and I think realistically, the days of perhaps getting something passed that would not be passed otherwise, I think, are kind of behind us. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, so the next, Councilwoman Nixon.
Thank you, Mayor. A couple questions, Jim, on the plan, and we're all referring it to Mr. Mosher's idea of the Blue Ribbon Committee. Could you just explain why you may have considered that option to put kind of a pre-community committee together, why you did not include that in your recommendation?
Well, part of it is in the interest of time. We have about 2.5 years to get through this process. Our assessment of the state of the general plan and listening to the community for the past, decade, and hearing the voices coming forward as these projects come in, I think it's pretty clear that maybe the vision has changed. And so, and maybe we, assumed that there needed to be this amount of change prematurely, and that is our mistake. But, we felt it was actually a decision was pretty straightforward for us. But, I think looking at the overall scope of the change and maybe diving into each element before we actually come forward with a recommendation, we can definitely do that with a committee, and we're happy to share our thoughts, and the community can share those thoughts, and then have a broader dialogue, if you will. We're happy to do that if that's the wishes of the council.
Just another question. Well, and if there are these individual community gatherings, I think they should certainly be encouraged and can inform the process. Speaking to these to be later determined mandates from the state, which that's nothing new. I mean, these kinds of mandates come down on various aspects of the elements of a general plan. I would presume that if there is such a mandate on certain kinds of housing that cities in the state are required to provide, there's usually an implementation window of 10 or 20 years or 5 to 10 years. I'm just speculating, but it's not something that would have to turn a city inside out overnight to conform with a state mandate. So I don't want us to get in a situation where we're chasing our tail on something we don't even know what's going to happen in 2020 or 2021, but knowing that housing is a critical component of our general plan. I'm sure we'll, on our own abilities, be mostly where we need to be in terms of the available land use, and just as we've mentioned about the affordable units that we've approved. So we understand that we have to move in that direction, but to chase our tail on something that we won't know for 3 or 4 more years seems like an unnecessary exercise. Thank you.
Councilman Piotr.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Jim, you said that the housing element is the next item that we really have to make an update on, and not until 2021. In 2006, the general plan was approved. It's supposed to be a 20-year document. Is it broken? Is there something that needs to be fixed on it besides the normal housing development or housing element aspect of it?
Well, I'll give you my opinion. I think the general plan is a sound document. The 2006 general plan was a new general plan for the community. The one prior to that was 1988, and it really, really was long in the tooth. The 2006 general plan, I think, is a good plan. I think it does need to be evaluated periodically, and that's part of what this process would be. And I think this one would actually be an update and refresh the existing plan that we have, as opposed to a complete update. Now, that's my professional opinion, but obviously, the community will advise us on this through the process that we establish.
But it's functioning as far as what we need to do. It complies with the state's rules. Our zoning is in compliance with our general plan. Everything comes together and works today.
Yes.
Is it not organized and in a readable form for the average guy to go in there and look at?
I think it is. We can try to improve upon that. It's a very difficult document to print. It's best to view it online. It's in various files, as Mr. Mosier indicated. We can look for ways to improve upon that, but I don't think that it is broken. I think it can be user-friendly. Again, maybe I'm not the right audience because I use it every day. But my staff, we're here to help the community read it and understand it. And, if they need something in that document, we're here to tell them where it is. We'll advise them on how it works. And so I'd like to devote our time to working through the community and guiding them through the process of whatever question they might have.
But we can do that without a general plan amendment or a revision. We can organize it in a way that it's more readable and online or offline to be able to do that.
Sure.
I guess my question is why do we need to go through this process? Maybe I'd be in favor of a blue ribbon committee to look at it and see if 2 years from now we need to go through the comprehensive general plan. But if we got a 20-year document, I'd be in favor of updating the housing element as required by code and whatever other minimum elements we have to update at the same time, and not do a comprehensive update maybe till 2025 or 2026 when our 20-year document's done, unless there's a proven need that we need to make some adjustment or amendment to it. And, we're talking about repeating the process in 2006. We're being accused, which none of us were part of that process. None of us were authors of that process. I was on the Planning Commission when it was approved by the City Council, but I didn't see it as part of the Planning Commission duties at the time. But I was aware of what was going on, and I didn't see a problem in the process. I was not on the GPAC. I was not on any of these committees, but I saw a lot of community involvement. I didn't have anybody ask me that didn't understand it or that there were questions about it. It seemed like it was an understandable document for anybody that wanted to go through it. Yet, looking back at it, they're being accused of not presenting it in a fair and orderly manner. I know you have the difficulty of 25 words or whatever that you have to actually put on the ballot to describe a document that is huge and immense, which is one of the reasons why you have representatives write this rather than doing it at the ballot box. But the backup documentation was there, and I've gone back and looked at it again to see if it was there and that I could understand it. I don't think it's a fair representation that the previous councils were purposely deceitful in trying to get something in when people didn't understand it, when you had 4 years of public hearings and so many people involved with the process, albeit before social media. So things might change. We're not looking to change land uses. We're not looking to change intensities. We're not looking to change setbacks or heights. We're not, all these fear-mongering things that are going on saying, don't change these things. It's like, we're not really intending to change these at all. We're just trying to make it an up-to-date document. So I'd be in favor of not doing anything right now and just waiting until we have to update the housing element and update the housing element alone. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councilman O'Neill.
Yeah, a couple other questions. Jim, 2017, the calendar year 2017, have we amended the general plan once?
Honestly, I can't recall, but if we did, it was a small, discrete amendment.
Okay. I mean, is there anything that in the next few meetings even that we're anticipating bringing something to the council that would ask us to change, to amend the general plan?
No.
Okay, so, all right.
Councilman Avery.
One of the reasons to update is just in response to the community, is that correct?
Yes.
And it just seems to me that, following on the mayor's comments, that we've got a much more involved citizenry now and a much more educated citizenry, and I think it's expanding all the time. So I think there's a great interest to participate perhaps review things, be involved, get sort of for the community to feel like they have a handle on the process, obviously, but on their future. I think the idea of having a blue ribbon committee, as Mr. Mosier suggested, is a really good one. But I think we need to think clearly about how soon we should bring this on, but perhaps not wait more than a year or two to do this, because I think there's an awful lot of interest in it. Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Duffield.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to confirm what comments from Councilman O'Neill said. I liked what I heard. I do believe in a blue ribbon committee would be helpful, and I was shocked. I have to say, Jim Mosier comes to all these meetings, folks, and most of the time it's either over my head or I don't understand what he's saying. But I turned to my colleague and said, you know what he said was pretty darn good. And so good for you on that one. I will say I am very disappointed in the general plan with regards to the harbor. Sadly, I think the intentions were there. The words sounded great, but there was no teeth. So hopefully we can address that when the time comes. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from the dais? So yes, Councilman Piotr.
I just wanted to follow up on what Duffy was saying. That is something that I would be interested in. If we didn't go ahead with this comprehensive general plan amendment, it would free up $1 million in our budget that's budgeted this year. And one of the things that I think we would all benefit from is to do a port plan, which is kind of like a general plan for the water. It doesn't deal with the land use, but only basically in the tidelands in the water area. And you go and get coastal commission approval, and it's kind of like the land use plan that we got approved from the coastal commission on the land side, but this would be for the water side. So we'd have control of our harbor as we now have control of our land use. And I would love to redirect some of that budget towards basically doing a general plan update for the harbor. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from the dais before I try to summarize it and give it essentially some direction to staff? Mr. Herman, I haven't heard from you. Do you have an inclination either way before I move forward?
Yeah, I have some thoughts. Any time we're doing a discussion about updating the general plan, it needs to be a very sober discussion. It's a very serious task. And, you know, some of the things I have to say about this condition of our city right now might not be real popular. But, and I don't even know if I'll say them. I guess what I'm more concerned about is getting a process completed that the community completely trusts. All right? And just based on the comments that I heard this evening, just people feeling like they have to remind us to be transparent puts that question of trust out there on the part of the community, and that concerns me. And therefore, I'm wondering if it's, to be quite honest with you, although I would thoroughly enjoy the work, I wonder if it's the right time. We have elements within our community that are in opposition to each other. We have no growth people. We have people who want to pave everything. And I'm concerned about the division that's in the community right now and the temperature within the community for completing this process. I don't know if the climate is that healthy to embark on this process right now, and perhaps things need to settle down and cool down before we begin this process. However, I have absolutely no objection to Mr. Mosier's suggestion about a blue ribbon committee beginning to take a look at areas of the general plan that we are going to eventually have to address. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments before I try to summarize what I sense? Well, I tend to agree with Councilman Avery on this. I'm of the opinion that if we give the people what they want, it will pass. And I'm not actually worried about it passing. And it will be transparent. And that essentially was my goal. I do think that it will be beneficial for us to start looking at this, but it seems that if I'm taking sort of a straw poll, it looks like there are at least 4 people who don't want to spend the funds and resources at this time, but perhaps are opening still to proceeding with the Mosier Blue Ribbon Committee, I'll call it. And then from there, circling back perhaps a year, 2, hoping that's not too much time, to revisit this. And whether it's only done for housing in the harbor or whether it encompasses more, we can determine at that point. So what I'm thinking, if that sounds agreeable to everyone, so it would save the funds Mr. Piotr was concerned about this time. It would save the necessary work Mr. O'Neill was concerned about this time, and Councilwoman Dixon were. But it would still move forward, at least in exploring this process, and we can make the harbor a more immediate priority. That it would accomplish the ultimate goal, which is to do a comprehensive general plan update that's supported by the people. So, staff, do you want a motion? Want me to take a shot at a motion?
It sounds like tonight would be the better time for that same motion that you're discussing. And that I think we'll try and recraft what you've said, Mr. Mayor, and present it to you in some written format, so something close to that. So that may be where you go forward from there.
Excellent, thank you. Okay. And Councilman Herdman?
Mayor Muldoon, I know that this was one of your targets, goals for this year during your year of serving as mayor in Newport Beach. And I want to express my appreciation for that in terms of recognizing the need and addressing the need and getting the ball rolling on this. I just want you to know that. Thank you.
I appreciate that, and I appreciate my colleagues indulging me. There is no timeline, and we'll do it when necessary and when it makes sense, and we'll listen to the residents' suggestion on this one as far as what foot to put forward first. So, any other comments? No other comments? No other staff input? Okay. Staff, do you have another item? Thank you. That's okay. Thank you very much, staff. On to study session item 4.
I don't want to assume the audience wants to hear our whole harbor operations presentation. If you do, we'd love it. But if you don't, you are welcome to go home and have dinner. So I never want to feel like anybody's stuck listening to a presentation we give. Besides council members. Let's see if we can find this.
We're going to take a brief 5-minute recess while the crowd exits. Be back in 5. Reconvening the November 14, 2017 study session. Staff, item 4.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members. I'm joined with me here at the staff table by Dennis Durgan, our harbor master, and Dave Webb, Director of Public Works. And I'm going to go through for you folks just an update, and it's about a 4-month update on our effort to administer the moorings, and I'll call it Moorings and More, in Newport Harbor. So I'd certainly welcome your comments and questions as we go along. This isn't a very long presentation, some good photos. I think you'll enjoy it. So just as a reminder of kind of what's gone on in the harbor, generally this has been overseen by the county since the 50s. And then in 1973, Harbor Patrol started to take on a greater role with, the County of Orange Harbor Patrol. And then, and we as a city had them start to work on administer our moorings for us. So basically, there was a fairly limited city presence, and it was pretty much an Orange County Sheriff Department presence up until about starting in April of this year. We provided a 90-day notice to the county to terminate a contract we have for mooring administration. And this transition all occurred July 1st, 2017, right before the 4th of July. Our timing was impeccable. Our objectives in doing this were to provide a better customer experience, friendlier approach, and to try to address some problems that we perceive the county wasn't addressing as fully, or maybe with the importance that we might, involving keep up of derelict vessels, excessive wake, things like that. And then we also had an opportunity to kind of consolidate how some of the marinas are managed that the city operates. So during this startup period, we established our headquarters, Dennis's headquarters at Marina Park. We did hire Dennis. We're glad we did. He's been terrific for us. We recruited, hired, and trained 13 harbor services workers. A few of them are in the audience there if you want to wave your hands. We appreciate your being here. We refurbished and outfitted our existing city vessel called the Clean Sweep, and then have 2 new catamaran-style vessels leased from the NAC. We established agreements for towing. We, under Dennis's leadership, again, established a new range. It's in your right-hand corner there, the lower corner, of new moorings for visitors, which is a terrific thing. It's right out in front of Marina Park. To increase the visitor experience there. We established email, phone line, et cetera. And then as a major project was transitioning the records from the county to us. Again, in those first months of operations, you'll see some snapshots. We provided some supervision during the July 4th, many mooring and slip rentals, a lot of non-emergency assistance and education. I'll show you some of those numbers in just a moment. Assisting vessels on the moorings, and then helping people with their mooring transfers. We've done sea lion abatement. We've done lost and found vessels. Believe it or not, they can be lost and found. Rafting up applications, mooring field inspections, again, the data collection and updated mapping. So we kind of get a feel for what boat is on what mooring, because I would argue that we didn't have a feel for that previously. We've worked really well, I think, with Dennis's operation has worked really well with the police department, code enforcement, and Harbor Patrol. And we've recently, code enforcement, again, a community development function, is focused on some vessels that are just really have been not well cared for in the past. I'll show you an example of that. And this is just Matt Cozyline with code enforcement sent this to me just today. So this is before. And this is after. And basically, we would have been before for a long time because nobody was really paying attention to the way this person was keeping up their boat. But with a little bit of encouragement and a gentle notice of violation, the boat is now clean and looks like it belongs in a nice harbor like our own. Here's kind of a summary of what we've been doing the first 90 days. You can see some of the numbers, lots of general assistance there, 787. A lot of sea lion abatement, some advisement in terms of speeding and wake, checks of moorings, debris, trash removal, etc. I won't spend too much time on this. Let's take a peek at it. These are our hours of operation. It's a 7-day-a-week thing, and we're in the summertime. We're out at least on Friday and Saturday until 10 p.m. the winter time will go to a little lighter schedule. You've seen the staff report. These are some of our projected staffing levels. You see how it does peak in the summer months. It goes back to smaller hours, lower hours in the winter months. You can see kind of just the different roles there. That blue line is the harbor services workers. We have 13 of them. This is also in your staff report. It's our typical weekly schedule for on-season as well as off-season. I won't spend too much time with these, just know that you have those in, not only here, but in your staff report. I just provided this to you and to the public today, but I'm trying to look at the budget in terms of what did we spend on related things. And I'll go through, I don't want to skip over this. So we did have the contract with the sheriff's department that we ended. So that money is available to us. So is one position that was formerly in Harbor Resources that we haven't filled when that person left. We also have money that we use to to have Basin Marine and Dave New manage Marina Park and the Balboa Yacht Basin. And then a couple things are underway, and I need to point these out. I'm not trying to be deceptive with you. Dennis's team, as well as revenue, are looking at a better appraisal, a fair market appraisal of what I would consider short-term guest mooring. So these are not our long-time mooring folks. These would be people who would, if I was one of those long-time mooring folks and I'm going to let the city know I'm going to be at Catalina for 2 weeks, the city can rent that mooring out. So this would be the price charged to that person who comes in and uses that can. We also have our Anchorage area. We also have our guest moorings there in front of Marina Park, and there's other ones as well. So this is kind of what a net revenue increase would look like if we got those to fair market value, and we have appraisal out now. That's the first line there under increased rate for short-term rentals. The second one is something I think the city should consider, and that is, so this is not a fee that exists today, that is, as Dennis's team is out properly enforcing charter boats and other things that that need some routine inspection, whether it's head count, whether it's the proper plumbing, whether it's noise, that we might want to consider an inspection fee for those activities. And I'm throwing that out there. I haven't talked to you about that, but I think there is merit in a cost of service based fee associated with that. I'd certainly welcome your your input on that.
Welcome that
I welcome
too.
the income. Very good slip of the tongue. Anyway, when you include those things, the total available sources are a little under $1 million. The uses of funds, and this is kind of if we were to basically just rush appropriately, headlong into this activity, it would be a harbor master, it'd have a dock master, at least one, maybe two, but one at least. And an admin position, and then those part-time harbor services workers 1 and 2, and that's the budget. There's the contracts down there, and you see, again, this is a uses of fund page. I can just about cover our costs with that plan. So this is kind of up for your consideration. That's what study sessions are about, and welcome your comments and criticisms there. But basically, the decision point for us today is, do we get our feet more wet in this activity? So I would call it, we've been in phase 1. I'm going to say what would phase 2 look like? Well, it's probably more on-water code enforcement. It's an update to Title 17, which Dennis has already been working on a little bit. It's maybe transitioning the private management of Marina Park to the harbor services workers, and maybe aspects of the yacht basin. We think we do need a workboat. I didn't put this in the operating budget. To me, this is a one-time purchase. To do the kinds of activities listed there. I'd welcome your consideration on this transition to full-time positions, and then your consideration of those fee adjustments for short-term guest rentals and maybe some inspections. This is kind of what our staffing chart looks like. This is in your packet too. It's in 2 pages here. You see phase 1 on the left, phase 2 on the right, and some of those changes. You'd see we still do have some contract assistance. Even in phase 2, some mooring maintenance that Mr. South does, towing, which emergency towing, which Sea Tow and Towboat US does. And then I do think because of the way we've gotten off the ground here, there are a lot of departments in the city that are interested in and available to help out Dennis's team to really enhance the customer service out there, provide challenging code enforcement activities, maybe even using the lifeguards more for after-hours assistance. So that's kind of what those pages look like. With that, I welcome your comments and questions, and I know Dennis and Dave would as well.
Thank you. Questions from the dais or comments? Councilman Herdman.
Dave, could you go back to the slide where it showed the potential income from, yeah, right there. Tell me what a fees for inspection and enforcement. Give me an example of what that might look like. Or Dennis.
Let's talk about a big charter boat.
Okay.
And the charter boat has 150 people, 200 people. Wedding goes out for 3 hours and comes back. I don't know that we've done the best job in making sure that the head count is actually counted, and that the plumbing.
In terms of what's allowable on the boat, you mean?
Exactly, and also
Okay.
what they report, because remember, there is a head tax. There's a per head tax.
Okay.
And it's fairly low. And actually, if you compared where we are with other harbors, we're well low. We're like $1.25, and you'll find places that are $6 and $15. And again, I'm not quite wading into those waters yet, but I do think we could establish a cost of service based fee that would reflect our staff time, Dennis's staff time, to board the vessel and inspect for the amount of people on there, not be a hassle, but inspect for noise even when we're not on the vessel, as well as then inspect the plumbing, because we want to make sure that there isn't a discharge either of gray water, certainly not black water. And we have found instances where there's gray water being discharged, and that's probably not a good thing for our harbor. I don't think it's per se illegal, but there are better ways to handle that.
And then the increased rate for short-term rentals. Describe to me the process for increasing the rate. Is this something that would go through the Harbor Commission, Mooring Association, or is this an action that the council can just take?
So we've embarked upon an appraisal that I believe the Harbor Commission is assisting with us in the review, and that is centered around, let's say we have a huge vessel that comes in, like what's the Invictus? No. Arguably, that probably should be paying a different rate than is set, and maybe I should just have Dennis explain better how those rates are, because I'm getting over.
Good evening, Council. Mayor Muldoon, and thank you for having me. The answer to Mr. Herdman's question is the fees that are charged currently are based on a nightly rental on the moorings that are available to rent per Title 17 of the city ordinance. They aren't really reflected in any of the Newport Mooring Association's annual fee whatsoever.
All right.
So the moorings that we put in along Marina Park, we rent for a nightly basis as well. So the city hired a consultant to come in and do an appraisal all over California, taking a look at many different harbors, and that report is coming back. And then in addition, the Harbor Commission was studying the fee for bringing some very large boats in that are probably too large to anchor in our two anchorages that we had this past summer. One was a temporary anchorage up at the west end of Lido Island, and then the other permanent anchorages down on the east end of Lido Island between Bay Island and the turning basin there. So, to be safe out in those anchorages, if you get boats over 80 to 100 feet that are anchoring in those anchorages, then you're basically going to eliminate the water space because the boats swing. And so you basically just take over, you'd have one or two boats that could use the anchorage instead of maybe 30 or 40. So what the city is desirous of doing is taking a look at what the new new fees could be for renting a mooring that's available to rent.
As a result of that appraisal?
Right.
Okay. So we have this potential new income here of revenue of 75,000 and 75,000. Can you jump ahead a couple of slides? What I'm trying to point out here, is that this is basically a wash with the exception of the purchase of the boat. Is that correct, Dave?
I would assert that as well, Mr. Herdman, provided that there was an ability to right-size the guest rentals and maybe look at an inspection fee.
Okay.
An alternative to that is we could not be doing those inspections. They haven't been done before to any great extent. So you could commensurately reduce our hours if you didn't want to pursue that inspection fee. I want to make sure the council has that flexibility.
Okay. So the hours that are built into those positions include that inspection time?
Generally, yes.
All right, thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Duffield.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, I want to put a big thanks out for our city manager for acting on this months ago, and he knew I was anxious to get going on the harbor, and this is one of the phases of improving our harbor that's vital, and I'm glad we're coming to the end of it with a positive result. I believe that people on the harbor that I've spoken to anyway are just loving the attention and the fact that they're getting help, they're getting educated, and they know where to go to ask for help. And with all due respect to the harbor, the sheriff department, they have play a very vital role in the law enforcement area for us. And we would never, we're not trying to overtake them in terms of that ever. And that I want to make very clear. But you have to understand that you start with the $300 million that our harbor produces every year, and probably more. This is a huge asset to the city, and so we have to treat our harbor correctly, and to continue that to happen. And so, just to give you a quick little example of how you would become a sheriff that eventually gets to the harbor to work on our harbor, you're a jailer, and you do that and other things within that type of law enforcement for upwards of 20 years, 15, 20 years. And then and only then after that, you might, if you apply for working on our harbor to be a harbor patrolman, you get the job. And that seems a little backwards that we have people who are with, a jailer's background, no boating background, running around our harbor in boats, and as I say, they're welcome. We welcome them to produce our law enforcement needs, but they do lack the expertise and the experience of being a boater, and that's what Dennis Durgan and his team bring to this new division. Every one of Dennis's staff members is actually overqualified. We were flabbergasted as to the applicants and how in-depth their experience and knowledge of boating was, as well as their love for the harbor. And so it's just been a fabulous addition to enhance what we put on. We basically put on a party every weekend, and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people come. And so we want to encourage and support and educate them so they have a good time. And I want to, for my fellow councilmen, I want to say Title 17 is the Bible for running this harbor, and I will have to recuse myself from all of that, but I just want to make everyone clear that once we get that document re-engineered to get things up to snuff and to our new technology-based world that we live in, we will then go into phase 2. And phase 2, there'll probably be a phase 3. Phase 2 is super important. I think Dave's done a great job finding some money. But again, I want to reiterate, at $300 million that the harbor brings in, I think we definitely want to acknowledge that probably this $1 million is not even nearly enough to provide the type of quality that we are asking this division to provide for us. It just goes on and on and on. Boat overhang, code enforcement of different various projects that are going on the water. These folks are on the water. They see it every day. And that's the type of management that we need to have, not up here. We're too far from the water here. We're right on Marina Park. Dennis has got his offices set up there. As I say, he's worked almost too many hours. We can barely afford him at this point. But I appreciate, again, all the things that he's done, and I just encourage the dais up here to please let's go into phase 2, and then let's get to phase 3 and get the results that I know we can get to. Thanks.
Councilman O'Neill.
Yeah, real quick, Dave, talking about the harbor operations budget. So first off, on the harbor resources supervisor position, essentially you'd be eliminating that position. Is that what you're showing on this?
That's right. I'd use those funds to and move the position either to the dock master or to the full-time harbor master.
Okay. And then how do the revenues work for the management of the 2 marinas listed?
So those 2 amounts there, 183 and 165K, are what we pay now to Dave New. He's done a great job, but to manage those marinas, Dennis believes, and after listening to him, Dave and I agree, that probably our team can do as good a job for arguably less money. So that's what we're talking about doing.
Okay. All right.
Let me note, I'm sorry, Mr. O'Neill, on
go ahead.
the yacht basin, the BYB, I've assigned all the funds here as a source of funds, but I actually left some of it in the contract ones on the next page because there could still be a role for Dave New at the yacht basin. And whether it's, we kind of need to think that through a little bit, whether that's a emergency role or a weekend role. I think we could have, we would do more and he might do less versus him doing nothing.
Okay. All right. That probably answers my question, because one of the things I was trying to figure out here is, as I'm looking at the revenue side of things, we canceled the $325,000 contract. And I'm trying to figure out down below on the use of funds, how much of that were we receiving in terms of the expenses? In other words, are we paying a lot more now for us to have taken on the responsibility that the sheriff used to do for $325,000?
Well,
and admittedly, very different service. And I did not ignore everything Duffy just said. So I want to be very clear. I recognize the service component to this has been different.
Yeah, if I could just offer a comment to reinforce that. We do have a totally different approach. We're out there with more people and more hours, and we're doing more things. And that was our goal, to do more administration and more, to again provide just a better customer service feel for that. And to me, it works, but certainly respect all your comments on that.
And last question, if we decided not to do the rate increases or fee increases of $150,000, would there be offsets down below, or would it simply be, it's hard to say operating in a net deficit because it is an operations side of things, but essentially I know what you're trying to do with this attachment C is to show essentially a net, but on this one, or net neutral. But if we decided not to do $150,000, would you be changing the uses of funds, or would you
be operating at the level down below.
I might change a little bit of the uses. There is some uncertainty as to, we haven't had a full year of our towing contracts, and I think I have listed the entire number in here for that. And we may find that we use a quarter of what we thought, or 30% of what we thought. So there is room there. To me, that's where most of the room there is. And you could, as a council, always decide this isn't something that needs to wash out. You could always just provide it with the title and subsidy because we think this is a good service to provide.
Okay, thanks, Dave.
Councilwoman Dixon.
Thank you. Mayor, could you go back to the previous source of funds? So the funds that would, well, first of all, I wanted to begin with this. Thank you, Dennis, and your team out in the audience. What I have observed personally, thanks to my personal harbor tours that Dennis and his team have provided, that you started, as you've said before, practically the busiest weekend of the year. Your first day on the job was July 1st, I believe, right before the 4th of July weekend. And as I have observed, not only did you bring your professional management ability into the operations of our harbor, but you were on a parallel track doing a McKinsey consulting study at the same time. So you have been operating and improving and creating operational success or improvements while you were actually doing the job and recommending improvements as you go forward. I think we've gotten more bang for our buck than I would have ever anticipated. So Dennis, I know every time I see Dennis at City Hall, he says it's his day off, but he's here all day. So we have really benefited from your expertise and your extensive knowledge of harbor-related activities, and I know we've talked about that before, but you bring an extraordinary degree of professionalism and harbor management skills and recognition of what needs to be done. Regarding the Tidelands Fund, I'm always a little, I don't know, skeptical is not the right word, careful about grabbing that money because that's precious money. So was that originally identified for capital projects or for operational projects? Just clarify my recollection of that, if you would, Dave.
So each of the items kind of in blue under City Tidelands Fund, obviously the ones in yellow would be new, are already in our budget under operations. They're not reserved for capital.
All right, so we're not touching the Tidelands capital. Okay. Regarding the you mentioned the party boats. How long has it been since I've done a revenue audit of the passenger count and how they're dealing with water uses and waste and that type of thing? When is the last time the city looked at that?
So we've only very recently, probably in the last 9 months, started to rotate through some audits of our charter operations. I don't know as well as I should whether we've ever boarded a boat or inspected plumbing to make sure there isn't a discharge. And there was an incident probably about 2 weeks ago where that was reviewed with our water quality team and code enforcement.
What was the date that the passenger head tax was implemented? Do you know? Or
before I got here, so it's at least 20 years before that. Sorry, 20 years ago or earlier.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's 92.
All right. So, just in the context of looking at all operations that touch the water, it probably makes sense to look at that as you would any other operating expense. Also, do we look at parking impacts with the party boats and all of the uses and how we are accommodating parking?
Well, each of the charter boats is supposed to have a marine activities permit. The marine activities permit describes where they're going to park and their capacity to park.
Okay, so that's kept current?
Generally, these are renewed every year,
okay,
and with an application associated with them. That's not to say that we couldn't be better about making sure that works well.
Okay. Well, you mentioned also in some of the cost offsets, I think the idea about using the lifeguards, they're in the hospitality and safety business, and that's kind of what our harbor program is all about. I think that would be a really good opportunity to cross-functionalize some of these support services. So anyway, Dennis, thank you, and your team, thank you, and you've really elevated the level of service on our harbor, and I hear about it all the time, and I see the boats out there all the time, and they wave, and they're friendly, and that's great. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Councilman Herdman.
Yeah, just one quick comment. As the program unfolds and we move into phase 2, if in fact we do move into phase 2, I'd like to see some integration and collaboration between the harbor division and our lifeguards, especially in the area of emergency medical assistance and incidences. Our lifeguards have the training, they have a boat, and Dennis, we should probably take advantage of that. Thank you.
Councilman Avery.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, we couldn't have asked, in my view, for someone better than Dennis Durgan to sort of get this rolling. He's so knowledgeable, grew up here, and has an intuitive knowledge of problem solving. And I think it's important to go back in history. I know Duffy knows this, and it's just coming from the Harbor Commission, both of us, and I know the current Harbor Commission feels the same way. You know, it's a new day, and it's really exciting. And I know many of you have lived here a long time, but growing up in this harbor, there were virtually no charter boats to start with. There was the Pavilion Queen or something. The whole nature of the harbor has changed. And that's a good thing because we've had more people getting access to the harbor than ever before, whether it's on Duffy's, on charter boats, big charter boats, wedding parties, paddle boards. People look out there and they go, oh, this traffic's terrible. Well, no, it's a good thing. It's what we want. We want the harbor to be open and welcoming and used, but we need to have people out there that know what they're doing on a Saturday or a Sunday afternoon and can just help people navigate literally and figuratively the harbor in terms of their knowledge, which way the current's running when they're on a paddle board, get them turned around the right direction so they don't spend hours getting back, that kind of thing. These are the things that we're trying to accomplish. And we're certainly not, in my view, trying to squelch any business or anything else. What we want is for people to be responsible partners in sharing the harbor with others, with us. And we've talked about this on the Harbor Commission. I know Duffy has led the charge on this. It's so important. And the thing that is a little frustrating for me and for people who've been around, and some people know this, but when people first look at the harbor, they say, what's the problem? There's no problem. Look, the harbor's beautiful. Everyone's having a great time. And that's true and it isn't true. There's a whole another thing that's going on in terms of asking people to be responsible. And also when you are providing access to, when you're running a vessel and you're having people on board your vessels paying passengers, there's a high degree of responsibility there. And so the charter boats started and there was no real framework for them to operate in for all these businesses. And we just didn't engage. And this is 30 years ago when it started. So this is a really important part of it. There are more liveaboards now on moorings than ever before. I personally think that's a good thing because I think it's like neighborhood watch. And again, that's terrific. But we need to stay, basically that whole community out there was left to their own devices. And we need to manage that to the degree of the agreement we have between the city and the mooring permittee. For instance, up until now, for many, many years, we've got 800 offshore moorings, so you can assume we've maybe got 500 boats out there, all required to have insurance. Just think when a boat sinks and the pollution liability, the oil and the diesel coming out of the boat and everything else, they were required under contract previously to have insurance, and that meant that the Harbor Department needed to manage that contract and make sure that everybody was insured. Well, that didn't happen. So it takes a lot of effort, a lot of time to manage 500 insurance. When the insurance expires and we get a notice, someone's got to follow up, it's a lot of time. So to manage it properly is going to take a huge amount of effort. and not a small number of dollars to do it, and to protect the interests of our visitors, but also protect the interests of our residents and the people on the water. It's the water quality issue is always there. We're making great strides, but we need to, as we said, about going and inspecting vessels of all kinds, not just charter boats, but finding ways to do it where it's not intrusive, where and this, by the way, Avalon does this very successfully every summer, where the people come aboard and put in the dye tablets, and the Avalon model is so great because the people that come aboard, the Harbor Patrol officers, city employees, are just so personable. They're just coming aboard, making conversation, and they know boats. It's great. And that's the sort of thing we need to get to, where we're working in partnership, because the water quality is so important, so we've got to be on top of that. Not only when we talk about gray water, so I'm going to stop here pretty quick, but gray water, people think it's harmless. It's not harmless, because on the larger the boat, the more people, if they're discharging soaps, oils, all the rest of it, grease, all of it, that's harmful. So we need to look at that. Again, we're not going to single anyone out, but that is something that we need to have in our control. So that's part of overall harbor management. Chris Miller's done a great job of managing the docks and everything else. He's had a lid on this, but he's had not a lot of help. So it's time to sort of bring on more help. I'm totally behind this 100%. Dovey's been fantastic sort of getting this teed up. And it's just a really exciting new day. And I know we'll get the Harbor Commission involved, and they obviously are involved, but in terms of how we set this up, we're routing things through the Harbor Commission, so we have actual residents sort of directly involved with our harbor, people that are boaters that are on the harbor using it, but also live in town. So it's really exciting. Thank you, Duffy.
Thank you. Any other comments from the dais before we got to the public? No comments or questions. Just so I'm clear on the inspection time, it's additional time that you're anticipating requiring to conduct inspections, correct?
Yes.
Because what are they doing when they're not doing inspections?
So hopefully this will answer your question, Mr. Mayor. Think about the charter vessels. Charter vessels, the major activities are afternoons and evenings, sometimes well late into the evening, and that we might have to kind of expand some of those hours based on that timing of the vessel's use. So that's a component of it. The other thing is we just we're finding that the team is the workday is pretty full with the other things that they're doing today. This would be in addition to it. So I would assert that you need more hours to accomplish an appropriate inspection regimen.
How many more hours?
We haven't looked at that fully yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent. Public comments, please come forward.
Honorable Mayor Muldoon, members of City Council, my name is Bill Kenny, and I must respectfully disagree with City Manager Kiff. I think discussing harbor operations is much more exciting than discussing general plan amendments. Thanks to the actions of this City Council, our city's taken back the administration of the moorings and the non-safety operations of our greatest asset, which is Newport Harbor. Some of my remarks are going to sound probably repetitive after what I've heard, which is to me very exciting. I do support City Manager Kiff with respect to the need to re-examine fees on the charter fleet. It's long overdue, and I think that what we are going to find, both the Harbor Commission and the city staff, is that we're probably well under market. What I wanted to talk about this evening was what's been happening at our Harbor Commission meetings. Last Wednesday evening, we discussed and took action on several harbor-related items, including time limits on our public docks, liveaboards, both legal and illegal, derelict vessels, as you saw in the photos, coordination with the charter fleet, which is one of our objectives, and stand-up paddleboard safety. The common issue among all of these topics that were discussed was not more codes or regulation, but enforcement of the existing ones. Our new harbor master has done a masterful job of building a department and making changes on the water. Our harbor has never looked better. But in order to continue the progress, it is my opinion that more resources need to be directed to enforcement of our codes and ordinances. When, as we heard at our Harbor Commission meeting last Wednesday evening, a charter vessel violated both the noise and the curfew ordinances, that resident needed to be able to go to someone in the city to get assistance. That means we probably need someone on the water, or at least in an office 24/7. Our 4 months of experience have shown that the sheriff's office will no longer provide non-criminal or non-life-threatening services. So as you review harbor operations, specifically Phase 2, let's make sure that we have the trained and qualified personnel to continue to make Newport Harbor the safest and most attractive small boat harbor in the world, and keep up the good work. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Kinney. Any other public comments on this item?
Mayor Muldoon, council members, and staff, my name is Dennis Baker. I compliment you for your support of this whole project. City Manager Kiff for pushing it through and getting it in place, and particularly our harbor master and his staff. I'm on the water a minimum usually of 3 days a week. I'm out in the harbor, and there was a mention about, like, what do they do in that? And it's, the difference is, one of the differences is height. When they come up in that boat, I'm down on the water. They're about this high. The sheriff is up here, and that sheriff is actually standing much higher. So that might sound like a little thing, but for the public perception, that's a whole different thing. You have a uniformed enforcement officer, or you have a very congenial, friendly-looking city staffer, these people back here, and I think everything on this has been really positive, and I think that this program and our harbor master should get all the support that he requires. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Baker. Next speaker, please. Seeing none, I'll bring it back for any more comments or input from the dais. Oh, thank you. Yes.
Evening, Mr. Mayor and council members. I'm Brian Ozonian. I'm on the water 24/7, 365 days out of the year, except when if I go away on a vacation. When we started to transition from the Harbor Patrol to our own business, our administrative businesses, we were told that we can do it cheaper and better for that $325,000. I am a little concerned that we tonight can see that that is not true. We are spending much more money. I'm putting aside effectiveness for a second because I think it's an outstanding job they do, and I think it's a new frontier in the harbor, and I think it's going to have many benefits, of which I see every day, every night. Now, if we're not concerned about the money, we're more concerned about the quality, I think we're headed in the right direction. But it's misleading to think that we started this off by saying we can take it away from Harbor Patrol and do it better and cheaper. Because we're not doing it cheaper, we are doing it better, to their credit. And it is nice to have a harbor master pick up the phone when you can make any concern more visible. It's very beneficial. So I'm not being negative, I'm being positive, and I'm also just calling to account these numbers were not where we started. So I hope, and to go both to Councilmember Avery and Duffield, that is community involvement. You have a large residential base around the harbor that needs to have input. May I suggest a postcard or online survey of these items as we get closer on improvement, how are we doing? These are the ones that pay the property taxes and also pay the titleman's fee to rent the docks. So I think including us in the decision-making process very visibly will be to your credit. How you update the Title 17, I think, is one of those things to ask input of the public. Generally, property owners all around the harbor, mooring holders, permittees, I think it all makes sense to invite them into the conversation. Now, the other two items I've talked about before, I've given you all a packet several times, save Councilmember Herdman. of two things. One is revenue sharing of the guest mooring. It's great we have moorings off Marina Park. However, you can come on my mooring and you can rent my mooring and you can take all the money and we get all the cost. That needs to change. And I proposed a 50-50 profit sharing or revenue sharing where the excess money that Chris Miller had talked about in 2015, approximately $85,000, would be split, shared as a credit against the fee for each non-commercial mooring holder, so that there's some type of sharing, because we bear all the costs and we get no revenue. So I want to press that point that that's work to be done. But the bigger work to be done is to revisit the mooring fees. As you know, we had quite an effort to get the mooring fees where they are, but I hope that one of you will bring it back in the future and let's discuss it, because the rent's too high. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers on this item?
Good evening, Honorable Mayor Muldoon and all councilmen and the city staff and others, including especially the volunteers that do a lot to help make this a better place. I am the community relations member of the Newport Mooring Association, and I would especially commend the staff who turned out in really previously unseen and unheard quantity of folks attending a special meeting that was held with the Mooring Association. Well over 100 people attended, and I thought there was just great interaction, wonderful feedback, and this really was a result of Councilman O'Neill continuing a particular item, the mooring specifications, and it was time to do this. And to Harbor Master Dennis, who is just doing a fabulous job, and of course really served as the MC of that meeting, and actually Dave Webb, who managed the portable microphone. There was a lot of great exchange, and so my message to all of you is our compliments, and really all of the folks who are being impacted, and no one gets impacted, well, more than those who are the mooring holders, and being involved with the city in what is being contemplated and having interaction together is just a wonderful thing. What you're working on now comes up later, but I feel like we've had some great conversations with Chris and Dennis and others. So that's a wonderful thing. It is a new day. Thank you very much for all your good works.
Thank you, Mr. Ford. Next speaker, please. All right, seeing none. Councilman O'Neill.
Yeah, real quick, I'll just say, first off, thanks, Carter, but I think the mayor and I would probably both split credit for the making sure that Newport Mooring got the voice there. And then to Brian's point, I actually tend to agree. I think that we probably are spending more than the Orange County Sheriff. However, I mean, you guys are just doing a great job. I mean, it's one of those things where I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, what else where else are we going to should we be spending money than like this? And it's laid out and it's not excessive and it's not enormous. And it's one of those things where I think everyone up here has devoted themselves to updating, upgrading the harbor, and you're doing it. I say move forward on all phase 2 bullet points.
Thank you. Staff, do you need additional direction? Okay, now is the time for public comments on agenda and non-agenda items. Please come forward. Excellent. Seeing none. City Attorney Harp.
Thank you, Mayor Muldoon. The City Council will adjourn to closed session to discuss items 4A through D, including meeting with the City Manager, Dave Kiff, Human Resources Director, Barbara Salvini, and Peter Brown to discuss labor negotiations with those unions listed under agenda item number 4A. Meeting with legal counsel regarding anticipated litigation by the unions listed under agenda item number 4B related to the Flores versus San Gabriel decision. Meeting with legal counsel regarding one matter of anticipated litigation, and meeting with legal counsel regarding the litigation entitled City of Newport Beach versus the Federal Aviation Administration. Thank you.
Thank you. We are recessed till a 7 o'clock regular meeting.
We
have a replacement. It's Reverend Toya.
November 14, 2017, regular meeting. Madam Clerk, roll call, please.
The record will reflect that all members of council are present.
Mr. Harp, is there a closed session report?
Thank you, Mayor Muldoon. There is no closed session report this evening.
Thank you. Is the Reverend from Christ Our Redeemer Church present? Yes. Everyone, please stand for invocation, led by Reverend Rankin. Please correct me and say your name.
It's a pleasure to be here. Let us go to God in prayer. Dear God, we humbly come before you this evening, asking for your divine wisdom and guidance as the city council, city manager, mayor, and all civic leaders dutifully work to serve the city of Newport Beach. God, we pray for harmony and order in these proceedings this evening. Dear God, in the seasons of Thanksgiving, dear God, we thank you for your grace, we thank you for your mercy, and we thank you for your provision, dear God. Father, help us to be good stewards of all that you've given to us. And Father, we lift up those who faithfully serve us and protect us, dear God, on a daily basis. Father, we ask that you keep them away from all harm, hurt, and danger. Father, keep them safe, dear God. Father, we ask that you bless each and every one in attendance this evening and bless all the citizens of Newport Beach. Amen.
Amen. Amen to order. Thank you. Now please face the flag and repeat after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one Thank you, Reverend. Madam Clerk.
The city provides a yellow sign-in card to assist in the preparation of the minutes. The completion of the card is not required in order to address the city council. If the optional sign-in card has been completed, it should be placed in the box provided at the podium. The City Council of Newport Beach welcomes and encourages community participation. Public comments are generally limited to 3 minutes per person to allow everyone to speak. Written comments are encouraged as well. The City Council has the discretion to extend or shorten the time limit on agenda or non-agenda items. As a courtesy, please turn cell phones off or set them in a silent mode.
Mayor Muldoon, if I might interject here for just a moment. There's 2 items from closed session that are going to get continued till after the meeting. The first one is conference with legal counsel regarding existing litigation. That's the City of Newport Beach versus United States Federal Aviation Administration. And then labor negotiations with the Lifeguard Management Association will also be continued to the basically the end of the meeting.
Thank you. City Council announcements are non-discussion items, and new items council members would like to be placed on future agendas. Mr. O'Neill.
Sure. A few things. The first was we were able to celebrate the Newport Beach Arts Commission luncheon for the Phase 3 Sculpture Garden. Got to sit with my daughter and right next to Mayor Muldoon, and then Councilman Avery, Councilman Herdman were with us. And I think just yesterday they finally put in the shark fin, which looks awesome, by the way.
Nice and shiny.
Yeah. And then Oasis 40th anniversary was a lot of fun. Councilman Piotr and I got to scoop a whole bunch of ice cream and serve some root beer floats, and then were able to put on our tie-dye shirts and go dance the next on Saturday. So that was to, let's see, what was it? Tijuana Dogs. And then movie in the park over at San Miguel Park was a lot of fun. Citizen of the Year event for Homer Bluedow was also enjoyable. And then Oasis Thanksgiving Luncheon is coming up on November 22nd. And then one last quick plug, Newport Navigator just went out, and for the first time, if you look on page 4, for the first time we have special needs programs inside the city of Newport Beach. If your family or a family that has an adult or a child with special needs, by all means, please direct them there. I just want to say a huge kudos to Laura Detweiler and her team for putting those programs together. So thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Piotr.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Are you taking future agenda requests now too? I'd like to request that the council come back and address some of the upgrades and updates to the audio-visual equipment in this chamber, something that would be paid for by the tax that's levied on cable users in the city.
Thank you. Mrs. Dixon.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I have some great news for residents of West Newport and Lido Village that Public Works is excited to announce, and I share their excitement, is that we're halfway through. We've crossed the halfway line, 50% complete on a $3.5 million water system project to replace and improve our water system in West Newport and around Lido Village. Our taxpayer dollars at work, so thank you, Public Works, that the project is replacing over 1 mile of water main pipelines, over 100 water valves, and 100 water services, and minimizing the impact to the community during construction has been an important goal, and the Public Works team always is exceptional in that area. Why this is so important is we are experiencing very positive economic activity, development activity. The new Lido House Hotel will hopefully be open February-March period, and Lido Marina Village, and all the improvements in West Newport will have a up-to-speed, up-to-date water main, and that is going to be important to all of us. So a few more streets to complete, and this is a value add. Again, taxpayer dollars at work, so thank you, Public Works. Also want to just thank Oasis for a fun party, a dance party with dancing. I got to dance with Councilmember O'Neill's daughter, because he wouldn't get up there right away, and she wanted to dance. So we had a lot of fun. And what is really significant, and Will has written a wonderful piece about Oasis, that this community does honor our seniors. And it's just not seniors, I guess, anybody over 50 or 55. So it's a wonderful, wonderful community center that was built by residents and built by the community's passion to support the seniors in our community, and we're very proud of it. So it was a lot of fun. So thank you, Recreation and Senior Services and the staff at Oasis, for delivering some fun-filled days of remembrance for 40 years. So thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Mr. Herdman.
Yeah, I have quite a few things to announce. I think the first thing I'd like to do, Mark, are you ready? When I say we, I mean Councilman Piotr, Councilman Avery, and myself worked with our planning division on a fix-it station in Backview Bay Park, and it has been completed. And there are some pictures of it up on the screen for you to take a look at. This is the second slide. It's one of the newest fix-its in Orange County. All the tools you need to help tune a bike, fix a flat tire, broken chain, or a loose nut, lift the bike, making it easier to work on. And then the third slide, one of the goals of the Water Quality Committee has been to add bottled filler stations Every year, the Public Works Department added a few bottle filler stations, and now we have over a dozen in the city. Why am I having trouble saying that? Back Bay View Park is our newest. Triple water fountain, bottle filler, drinking fountain, and a doggy bowl. All right, thank you, Mark. This Friday at 3 p.m. here at City Hall, City Manager Dave Kiff and I will be hosting an informal meeting for the community. Anyone who wants to come in and talk about John Wayne Airport issues. We, again, I'm saying we, and I want to publicly thank Dave Kiff for being my companion at 2 different meetings this weekend. Saturday was the Balboa Island Improvement Association General Membership Meeting, and Sunday was the Irvine Terrace Homeowners Association Annual Meeting. And the main topic that was talked about at both of those meetings was the implementation of the Next Gen Flight Path program that's being implemented nationwide and the impact that it's having on certain areas within our city. Dave was an absolute asset all weekend to me. I'm becoming better educated and much better informed and able to address questions myself, but the ones that are more detailed, Dave is just an absolute asset. So I want to thank Dave for that and also tell you that those 2 meetings took place. Out of a recent airfare meeting, however, the need for this meeting on November 17th, and there will be subsequent meetings that will be scheduled for just on an informal basis for the community to come in and talk to us about airport issues and to also get updated and informed on our progress and work with the FAA. I attended an absolutely outstanding, I'll call it a seminar or workshop at the Oasis Senior Center last week. My compliments to John Kappler, Dave Webb, Bob Stein, who provided the community with a very comprehensive update on what is taking place in this city by our Tidelands and Water Quality Committee. Projects that have been completed, projects that are on the horizon. Just an excellent, excellent meeting that was attended by about 170 people. What else? Aviation Committee meeting is coming up next week. And I want to thank George Murdoch for helping me out in my district, specifically on Balboa Island. We are infested with raccoons on the island, and George has stepped in and going to take care of trying to trap some and eradicate the population that seems to be growing and growing. I also want to mention that Mark Vukojevic, Tom Edwards, Dave Kiff, Dave Webb were also available over the weekend. Mark not physically, but Mark provided some excellent paperwork for people who attended these 2 meetings having to do with raising the seawalls on Balboa Island, main line water replacement. That's a project that's going to be taking place, the refurbishment of Marine Avenue, and the traffic calming efforts on Bayside Drive. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Avery.
I've got a couple of items regarding Newport Heights. First, we've got about 30% of the alleys complete in the total Newport Heights alley replacement program. The 15th Street sidewalk is complete. These alleys are concrete, so I don't have an alley in my Heights, behind my Heights home, but I wish I did because that's a really nice feature. And they're doing a great job, Public Works, with working with all the residents. Virtually every house has some issue as you kind of bring the alley through. And they're turning these alleys around, which are quite long and large, in 7 to 8 days. So it's quite an effort. That includes demolition, grading, pouring the concrete. And it's I don't know, to me, it's just an example of what a great town we have to really be just doing this kind of work. It's so awesome, and in a certain way, it ties into my next announcement, which is the preliminary traffic study. We're just having sort of an outreach to the community to give them a heads up on that. And so this is a town hall, if you will, at Mariners Library in the multipurpose room this Thursday, November 16th at 7 p.m. And this really concerns our Heights residents, I think, as most people know. We've got 3 schools in the area, and we have some serious concerns about the safety of kids and others at peak periods and at all times. So this is really bringing the residents together with planners. There's already been quite a bit of work done, but to come up with some real improvements to neighborhood safety as regarding traffic. So those are the 2 things. I hope anybody that's up in the Heights or anywhere in town, really, it's interesting. I think a traffic study for the protection of citizens and better flow, bike lanes, that kind of thing would be interesting to anyone in any neighborhood. So we're very fortunate again that we have a city that's moved forward on this project, and I'm really looking forward to seeing it through and hopefully implementing whatever the outcomes are. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Duffield.
Yes, I have 15 items. Won't take too long. Just kidding. I'm embarrassed I don't have any.
Thank you. This last weekend, I attended the Back Bay Therapeutic Riding Club, and I would like to invite the representatives to please come forward to the podium. I saw firsthand some of the amazing things they're doing in the Back Bay at this riding club, including children and veterans with injuries or special needs, be more social, comfortable, and confident on horses and outside of their typical surroundings and at a nice location. So I figure before I read this proclamation, Ms. Bernadette Olson is present. Looks like another representative as well. Please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about the program.
Okay, my name is Bernadette Olson. I'm an advanced therapeutic riding instructor. I started this program in the city of Newport Beach 11 years ago with a dream to bring a therapeutic program inside the city to the Back Bay. Horses in the city are a really unexpected sight, and I feel very blessed and special that we can be where we are in the Back Bay. At Back Bay Therapeutic Riding Club, we provide a safe environment for our bomb-proof specifically trained therapy horses and our volunteers to work with the students. Everybody experiences an empowering transformation sitting on the back of a horse. And if you imagine doing that blind, or if that's the only thing you can do by yourself, like it is for a lot of our clients, it makes it even more special. We also started a program with Wounded Warriors. We had a month ago, we had 20 soldiers on with our horses. They had brunch out there, and they brushed and rode and walked in the Back Bay with our 2 miniature therapy donkeys and our horses. And we had several people cry and tell us that for their PTSD, that was really the first breakthrough they had after they came back from Afghanistan. It was very empowering. We right now have 6 therapy horses, 2 donkeys, and 2 goats and a pig in our program. Our children come from, our volunteers come from Newport Harbor Heights, Newport Harbor High School, Ensign Intermediate School. We have several senior citizens from Newport Beach come and volunteer, assist our special need riders. And we go anywhere. We work from 2-year-old children with cerebral palsy all the way up to, on Friday I had a blind gentleman also from Newport Beach who lost his eyesight through cancer 7 years ago. And it was his first, he used to be a mounted policeman, and it was the first time he came and was sitting on a horse again. I'm the program director and the founder of this program. I'm originally from Germany. I started therapeutic riding when I was 14. And I've seen incredible transformations from adult and children. We had people say their first words on our horses. We had people walk or stand after they did our sessions. The horses are partially rescued, partially donated. We live strictly from donations. We only have 3 paid staff members, which get minimum wage, and everybody else is volunteering. So this is our executive director, Elise Crémant. She is from France. She has taken over the program for me 3 years ago, and she's also a PhD in neuroscience in France. And she's now running our program. She's actually living at the facility. So I have Elise say a few things. We feel so special that our mayor came on Sunday and actually jumped on a horse and rode a few steps. So it was really cool. It was so nice for everybody to see that. We're grateful and thankful. So Elise is going to say a few words. Thank you for having us.
Hi, I'm Alice. Sorry. I'm Alice Crémant. I'm French, as you can hear. And I started to work with Bernadette 4 years ago, and I discovered therapeutic riding, and it's something really special. So just to finish up, the Back Bay Therapeutic Riding Club is a non-profit organization which gives people the chance to heal on or with a horse in the city of Newport Beach. It also gives the opportunity for our kids to be part of that as volunteers, achieving their community service. We can't express how grateful we are for finally being recognized and hopefully supported. Thank you for having us.
Thank you. And I wanted just to invite you to recognize you, and I'll read a copy of the proclamation. I handed you the original one on Sunday.
Our ones is at the frame already. So otherwise we would have brought it. Thank you. That was incredible.
That is my pleasure. One nice thing you could do when you're mayor. And I also wanted to raise awareness, just like Councilman O'Neill alluded to. The city and the community is getting more active in addressing needs for individuals, and one can be the private sector, which you do through private donations and a lot of volunteer hours, and some can be through our own city programs as well. So if you indulge me, I'll read this proclamation.
One last comment. We would love to have support from the city and go in the Newport Navigator and offer our service to the city of Newport Beach officially. I mean, that's one of our goals. So thank you.
Thank you. Let me read this out loud and embarrass you for a second, Bernadette, if you don't mind. Whereas Bernadette Olson, veteran rider, instructor, coach, and horse lover, has been passionate about transforming lives with therapeutic horseback riding since she was 14 years old. Whereas being raised in Germany and working as a riding instructor with people with disabilities, Bernadette was inspired to bring her lifelong dream to the city of Newport Beach. Whereas with the support of family and friends, the Back Bay Therapeutic Riding Club became official in 2007. And whereas the club was a family-owned and operated business that Bernadette, while raising 2 sons with the help of her husband Jeff, has turned into a sanctuary for rescued horses and other creatures. And whereas the club is a nonprofit, all-volunteer-supported organization that has served a special niche, offering a unique environment for riders, their families, and rescue animals. Whereas thanks to generosity and hard work of Bernadette, her family, and staff, Back Bay Therapeutic Riding Club has become an amazing sanctuary for homeless animals and unwanted horses to interact and bring joy to the lives of special needs clients, their families, and volunteers to give back to the local community. Now, therefore, I, Kevin Muldoon, Mayor of the City of Newport Beach, behalf of the entire Newport Beach City Council, do hereby recognize Back Bay Therapeutic Riding Club for your service. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.
Would I take a quick picture in front of the flags? I don't have a proclamation to present you, but we'll still do one. My favorite part of that property, actually, is there's a large pig. Its name is Leonardo de Porco. That's one of my favorite actors, and that's a great name for a pig. Matters which council members have asked to be placed on a future agenda. This is not a discussion item at this time. We're merely going to conduct a straw poll to see if there's support to discuss this matter further. This item to be considered tonight is asking the city manager to return with a strategy for improving our response to homeless concerns, given potential changes to camping activities at the Santa Ana River. And this is proposed by Councilwoman Dixon. So just with a show of hands, please let me know if you support this item being discussed at a later date.
That was unanimous.
Thank you, Madam Clerk.
This is the time in which council members may pull items from the consent calendar for discussion. Those are items 1 through 16. Public comments are also invited on consent calendar items. Speakers must limit comments to 3 minutes. Before speaking, please state your name for the record. If any item is removed from the consent calendar by a council member, members of the public are invited to speak on each of the items for up to 3 minutes per item. All matters listed under consent calendar are considered to be routine, will all be enacted by one motion in the form listed below. Council members have received detailed staff reports on each of the items recommending an action. There will be no separate discussion of these items prior to the time the City Council votes on the motion, unless members of the City Council request specific items to be discussed and are removed from consent calendar for separate action. I also need to announce that I will be recusing myself from item 12 if the item is pulled because I live within 500 feet of the project.
Thank you. Council, any items to pull from the consent calendar, items 1 through 16? Mr. O'Neill?
15.
Mr. Piotr?
Number 9, please.
Mrs. Dixon?
13, please.
Mr. Herdman?
None.
Mr. Avery?
None.
Mayor Pro Tem Duffield?
I am none.
And I'd like to recuse myself on a bunch of caution on item number 5. Do we have any other items to be continued or removed by staff?
I do have a substitute a resolution for item 3. And you have the continuation there of item 4. You have a memo to that effect. I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Duffield, do you have a motion?
Thank you, Mayor. I move the balance of the consent calendar, items 1 through 16, with item number 9 pulled by Councilman Piotr, with item number 15 pulled by Councilman O'Neill, with Councilwoman Dixon pulling item number 13, and a recusal on item number 5 by Mayor Muldoon, and with item number 4 being indefinitely continued, and a substitute for item number 3, which I didn't follow completely, but
Just a modified resolution.
a modified resolution.
And I just have to make one, because I just got this modified resolution, I'm going to lodge an abstention because I can't have a chance to read it. So to add that, an abstention from Councilman Muldoon on item 3.
And what Mayor Muldoon just said, please.
Thank you. All right, let's vote. Oh, that's right, thank you. Public comments on
Second.
Public comments on the consent calendar. Those are the items that we've just simply addressed. This is not items that are not in the agenda. Please come forward.
Mayor Muldoon, members of the City Council, my name is Jim Mosier. I would once again remind the mayor of the city of Benicia, where instead of just numbers, the mayor actually reads the titles of each of the consent calendar items so that the council members and the public know what you're discussing. I would like to call attention to 3 of these. One of them is item number 3 with the amended resolution. This has to do with increasing the rates that the city charges for recycled water. I understand that we try to recoup the cost of the water that we sell, so we sell it for whatever the price is that we pay for it. My understanding from the staff report is that the price we're paying went up on July 1st, several months ago. We've been paying that higher price, and even the amended resolution, we're not going to start charging the customers more until January 1st. And so I'm curious what happens during that 6 months. Are we going to try to recoup the cost of between what we paid and what we have charging the customers? What's happening with that? Next item I wanted to call attention to is number 8, which is the professional services agreement for preparing a environmental impact report for a large new housing project, potentially going in near the airport. The thing that's of interest of this, although you're considering approving the contract tonight, it's already on the city council's, on the city website calendar, that this consultant will be holding a meeting overlapping with Council Members Avery's town hall meeting at which they will be doing a scoping for the environmental impact report, which means they've already done quite a lot of work on it. And I'm wondering how it can be that we're paying somebody for a lot of work they did before we've even selected them as the contractor. Kind of a perennial question I have. I never get a good answer to that. And item number 16 is about allocating $95,000 to backfill overtime so that one of our firefighters can attend paramedic school, which I think is a very worthy thing. I didn't have time to read this just before the meeting. I cannot tell from the staff report whether the paramedic school, it says January 2018. I'm seeking clarification of whether the entire paramedic school and the $95,000 is just a 1-month event, or if the school takes longer than that. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker on consent calendar.
Hello, good evening. My name is Robert Mershafi. I don't live in the city, but I do visit the city from time to time. One of my concerns was item number 16, which is the paramedic training and allocation for the cost of that training. I see that it says $95,000. Recently, I was a victim of a medical incident, I guess you could say. And for whatever reason, I don't know what the reason is, and that's part of my concern of what the training entails as far as it affects the general public, because I was taken against my will to the hospital. I don't know what, I've talked to a lot of different individuals within your government, and all of them have said that they've done everything that they're supposed to do, except that no one could really give me an explanation of what gave them the right to take me against my will to the hospital, or to call for the police department to come and handcuff me unnecessarily to take me to the hospital against my will. Where at the hospital, I didn't receive any services. I refused all services. I refused all services at the scene, refused all services at the hospital, and I don't understand how that all works, how that all goes together. I don't understand, because I have a pending issue with trying to come up with a claim for the city of Newport Beach for that incident. It just happened 2 days ago. I was injured by the paramedic staff and the fire department and the police, and there was no reason. I was a victim of a medical incident. I don't know where this training comes into play and what it entails. So I'm just curious on that.
Okay. Well, thank you for addressing us. I will request the city manager, Dave Kiff. He is the gentleman in the November mustache and yellow tie. You see him over there to address your questions one-on-one. That'd be a staff issue, not a policy issue on the council dais. Any other comments on the consent calendar? Okay, seeing now, back to the dais. We have a motion and a second. Let's vote.
Motion carries unanimously, 7-0.
Thank you. Item 9, we'll turn to staff if there's a request for a staff report. For Mr. Piotr, do you want to discuss, or do you want to?
I would like to discuss it. There's a recommendation before by the Finance Committee to hire a single investment manager. And there was a lot of discussion at the committee to hire two. So I'm looking at the option of, can we hire two? And what are our advantages and disadvantages? So I don't know if this council needs a staff report on this or not.
I think just answering the question should suffice.
Sure. So the committee did consider hiring one versus two managers. In the end, staff did make an initial recommendation that the committee approve and city council approve going to one investment manager. At one point, I think 10 years ago, the city had 5 investment managers. Over time, we've whittled it down. We got it down to 2. And there are 3 primary reasons for doing so, and that is the first being staff efficiency, reduced coordination efforts, and fewer quarterly meetings with each of the advisors. It's also costly to maintain 2 investment advisors. The winning bidder actually had a lower tiered pricing than the other bidder, and there's a sort of the idea of aggregating assets saves the money. There's more economy of scale, and there's a lower cost. A third reason is that we found over the years that the firm that we selected, Chandler, better delivers on the city's cash flow needs. There's better communication.
Understood. Mr. Piotr, if you have a motion to amend this, I probably would support you.
Yeah, I would like to propose that the portfolio be split as close to half and half as possible, and that it be done with 2 investors. And I'm totally open to the Finance Committee in approving those. The top 2 were PFM and Chandler. I'm okay with it being those 2. So I'll make a motion that it be PFM and Chandler, and that the portfolio be split, and that the custodial banks also be 2 different banks. So it's not just 2 investing firms with a single custodial bank, if we can do that.
I will second for the sake of discussion. Any requests to speak on this item? Mayor Pro Tem Duffield.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. From what I understand, our investment portfolio is very limited on where it can be put, and I think that it's so limited that I don't see the need for having 2 people. I think that there's one's plenty.
Mr. Mayor, if I can respond to that real quick.
Sure.
I understand we're very limited in what we can do, to the point where basis points and having them compete against each other to do a better return, we're talking minuscule amounts. But I think we have about a $200 to $280 million portfolio, depending on what time of year it is and how our cash flow is going. And it just seems to me that we ought to have, it's large enough that even split in 2, it's much bigger than a lot of other cities' total reserves. And I just think it makes sense to have our eggs in 2 baskets rather than 1, in case there's ever a problem with either a custodial bank or an investor. Not that any of these would have that, that there wouldn't be safeguards to prevent a Robert Citron situation. It's just the policy of splitting our assets and not having them all in one bank and 1 investor.
Councilman O'Neill.
Dave, were you going to say something?
I was listening to Mr. Piotr's motion about splitting the banks as well, and that would be something that I think isn't part of the agenda. Certainly something you could discuss, but I'm a little concerned that about the custodial bank splitting just not being properly noticed.
Mr. Harp, is that something that we should bring back? We'd seek to desire.
Yeah, I think that is an item that should be brought back.
Okay, so Mr. Piotr, you'll amend your motion just to include 2 investment entities at this time?
2 investment brokers, and bring back a split of the custodial bank for further action.
All right, second that amended motion. Mr. O'Neill.
Okay. So this was something that was pretty robustly discussed at the Finance Committee with 1 dissent. And so what the issue is this, the investors, either PFM or Chandler, do not actually have our assets. Those are held by a custodial bank. It is not a situation where they can take the money. It's not a situation where if they have issues with any of their other clients that they could backfill those clients by using city money. So we are not putting all our eggs in one basket by having 1 advisor. And in fact, if anyone would love to go through our finance policies and look at how our investments are allocated, We can go, what is it, Steve, no more than 5 years, and in fact, the vast majority of our assets are held on a 1 to 3 year basis.
1 to 3.
Yeah, and if anyone's ever tried to allocate their assets on a 1 to 3 year basis, it's not exactly the best return on your investment. But what it does is it makes sure the money's there when we need it, and that's the strategy we've got. And so the goal here is the efficiencies, and then the goal here is to get the a reduction in cost. And so it's not the easiest thing in the world to decide, because in theory, if you go through the competition, and we think that the competition between two firms will cause a greater investment return than the savings that we would have on going to two firms or going to one firm, then yes, you make that decision and flip the other way. But at the end of the day, what we know is cash in hand, and cash in hand is if we go down to one, and in this particular case, it's Chandler. So I'll oppose the motion, but I would support I'm not going to make the substitute motion because I'd like to see how the votes play out, but I'm going to oppose this motion, and then if it fails, move the staff recommendation.
Sounds like you, okay, so no second at this time. It's just telling us what you're going to do. Councilwoman Dixon.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Let me just speak to the decision of the vote of the Finance Committee and just take you through the process. The request for proposals for the investment advisory contract required bidders to provide rates for managing a portfolio of up to $400 million. The million dollars. The proposal specifically requested the bidders to describe the advantages and disadvantages of the city having one versus two investment advisors. The committee agreed with staff's recommendation that one advisor could provide services to the city for our reserve funds, and these funds total approximately $200 million. Actually, it's about $187 million, and would greatly improve the efficiency and reduce fees in the process. The committee agreed that the performance of the two top bidders was comparable within a minus or a point basis point, less than a point basis point. In selecting one advisory firm, the committee requested that staff pre-qualify a second firm, and the second bidder firm is already pre-qualified as a result of the RFP process. The committee was concerned if there would be some extraordinary event that the first firm, Chandler, could not perform, then we would have already pre-qualified. So in terms of, again, mitigating or eliminating any risk to the city's reserve funds, the committee has made that assurance. The firm selected, Chandler Asset Management, was selected by the committee because it is the best fit for the city, as well as the city's narrow focus on fixed income investments and direct access, which Councilman Member O'Neill mentioned. Our assets are extremely limited in 1 to 2 year, less than 2 year investment horizons. Chandler has managed a portion of the city's investment portfolio continuously since 1991, so they're familiar with the city's policies, our investment policies, our reserve policies, and they provide direct access to city staff, whereas PFM, which is a fine national firm with comparable performance results compared to Chandler, they're a larger firm, and our staff has sometimes difficulty in reaching directly our portfolio manager. And the fee is more competitive going with Chandler. So the Finance Committee, looking at financial efficiency, comparable capability, and comparable performance, believe that staff's recommendation was certainly appropriate. So I would oppose that motion as well.
Thank you. Any other speakers on this item? Go out to the public. Any public comments on this issue?
Mayor Muldoon and members of the council, my name again is Jim Mosier. I personally support the staff's recommendation for the reasons that Mr. Montano stated. However, I did think the staff report was a little inadequate in saying only that staff's recommendation was presented and supported by the Finance Committee. Not all of you are on the Finance Committee, so not all of you know what happens there. There was, as you heard, a, quote, robust discussion, and I would think in preparing the staff reports, the full council should at least get an objective report from the city staff of what the opposing viewpoints were, so that you yourself could weigh those and also what the final vote was before the Finance Committee. The implication is it was unanimous, and I don't believe that's correct. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comments on this item? All right, seeing none, bringing it back to the dais. I seconded this motion for the sake of discussion, but it looks like there probably is not the support for Mr. Piotr. So this time, would you like to withdraw your motion, or would you like to call the vote for it?
Yeah, I'll vote.
All right. Let's vote on Mr. Piotr's motion, which was amended to include a staff report change requiring 2 consultants.
With everyone except for Councilmember Piotr voting no, the motion fails.
Mr. O'Neill, do you have a substitute motion? Or a whole new motion?
A whole new motion. I move staff recommendation.
I second.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Quick discussion. It wasn't in the staff report. I asked for it separately, and I got an answer. I'm on the TCA's board. I'm on their finance committee. And we have Chandler, who is a great firm, don't get me wrong, as their main investor. But then they actually hire PFM to review Chandler and to kind of watch over their shoulder, because they didn't feel that they wanted to make sure that they had somebody who really knew what was going on to look over their shoulder and know what's going on. So as a board like this, it's nice, as well as the TCA board, to know that there's a watcher there that's got experience. Now, can you explain how we do that?
Sure. We get a feed from our custodial bank on all transactions made, the status of our cash flows. And so that feed is put into a software that we use, and it's accounting investment advisory software, and it tracks and makes sure that the reports that we're getting from Chandler are consistent with what the feed from our custodial bank says that they're doing. So that is our check. At the same time, Chandler uses a similar software, Charles River, and they cannot themselves make investments that are different from our stated policy or the California code. So there are significant constraints and restrictions to doing anything outside of what they're authorized to do per California code and our own investment policy. So I view that as it's really a double check, so to speak.
So basically, we're trusting software programs to do it, and I'm sure that a company like a PFM probably uses similar software to do it, because the transactions are, so major and so many of them that they probably can't keep track of all of them. Yes. Who runs our software product, and what kind of experience does he have in this field?
So the firm we use is called Clearwater. They have $1.5 trillion in assets under management, mostly from private sector firms. They have a good share of public sector firms. It's a rapidly growing company. We've been with them for, I would say, 5 years, and they've grown rather quickly. So they're getting more and more business. So that's the software that we use.
So we use their software, but somebody still runs that software.
Yes, we maintain and manage the software. As I say, we get the feeds directly from our custodial bank, so it monitors and keeps track of our investments, our cash flows, assets as they're being sold and matured. We keep track of that ourselves in the software.
So back to my original question, who on our staff has the experience to use that software and knows what they're doing?
There's 3 of us that do so, myself, the finance director, and a senior accountant on staff. All use the software weekly, and we use that software to generate our monthly treasury reports that are posted to our website and now provided to the Finance Committee monthly. And
do any of the 3 of you have experience in investment banking, like a Chandler or a PFM?
Neither of us have worked in investment banking, but we've gone to training. We've taken classes on how to use the software, and we manage it ourselves. Mm-hmm. As do most. Half the cities in Orange County manage their own investments, and they use software like that. And so there's similar training. We've been to several trainings on how to use the software, and even investment trainings not even related to the software. We regularly keep up on our training.
So my concern is that, who's watching it? And basically I'm hearing that we've got guys that are trained to use software, whereas other companies like TCA will actually hire another investment company to look at it. Might I suggest that staff make a presentation on how they're doing this, watching to the Finance Committee, and have the Finance Committee report back to us if they're happy with that or not, or if that aspect of our financial investing needs to be augmented.
I think we treat that as an informal request. That shouldn't be a problem. Councilwoman Dixon.
Yes, let me just respond to that. Performance is obviously something that's measured quite carefully, and the Finance Committee reviews that on a comparative basis and against benchmarks that are in the investment banking world. So we're looking against major financial benchmarks. So any variance or unusual activity would be immediately apparent clearly through the software signals that would come. But if you would like, and we do get a report to the Finance Committee on this on at least a semi-annual basis, or maybe quarterly sometimes. We're changing it, but that's no problem. But I have confidence, as I believe the other members of the Finance Committee feel, that the performance capability of Chandler certainly is comparable to the best benchmarks in the marketplace. Thank you.
Thank you. Having a motion from Councilman O'Neill and a second from Councilman Dixon, correct? Let's vote.
Motion carries unanimously, 7-0.
Item 13, Councilwoman Dixon.
Yes, I have just a quick question of Mr. Hetherington. Thank you. First of all, I commend the Newport Arts Commission for going through the process of identifying activities or agencies, organizations in the community. My question is, after they received, and I see some members of the commission here, and they may wish to answer, but could you clarify, in addition to the funds that the city council does allocate to the Arts Commission and the proceeds from a percentage of our transient occupancy tax, why there's a necessity for the Arts Commission to allocate to themselves for the $25,000 additionally for disbursement to community organizations? I love the idea, and I've talked a lot about this, about encouraging organizations to petition and apply for support, and so we're limiting the diversity of our applicants, in my opinion. So,
the Arts Commission feels that the programming that they do impacts the most residents. They feel it's the most cost efficient. In fact, if you look at the price of a concert and green, it's generally $6,000, and if you get $2,500 attendees, that's a pretty good per capita, I guess, and per capita use of the funds. They also feel that we have access to the venues that can accommodate the most residents, and they also can take advantage of the promotion and that we can do through the library and the Cultural Arts website and mailing lists.
Okay. All right. Okay. I just like to see the diversity of applicants because I think that encourages citizen community involvement and participation, and now we've kind of funneled more through the Arts Commission, which does a fine job. Don't misunderstand, I'm very supportive of the Arts Commission. I just like to spread it around more to get more self-involvement by community organizations. So thank you.
Thank you.
I'll make a motion to support.
Staff recommendation, I'll second.
Thank you. Public comments on this item? Seeing none, bring it back to the dais. Any comments? Let's vote.
Motion carries unanimously, 7-0.
Item 15, Councilman O'Neill, do you want to report on this?
No, Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to point out with Steve up here, I wanted to ask just a couple questions about pages 15-14 and 15-15, which address revenue from specific development fee agreements. So Steve, specifically, so let's run through these real quickly. So new home company development agreement, fiscal year 16-17, $2.7 million. You see that?
Yes.
Where does that money go?
That money is transferred out to the Marina Park Fund related to the Marina Park facility construction.
And then if we go on to the next page, the Uptown Newport Development Agreement, which was a $16.1 million revenue. And then one of the transfers out is also the Marina Park Fund of $5.8 million. Do you see where I'm at?
Yes.
And that goes toward what?
That also goes to the same facility. All funds flow from the FFP out to our project construction funds. And in this case, we have the Marina Park Construction Fund. So these are monies that were earmarked for that project.
Okay. And one of the other ways we paid for Marina Park was through the Tidelands Capital Fund, correct?
Yes, the marina portion of that facility.
Right. And so just to be clear when we're talking about this issue, the Marina Park, because it's sitting on the Tidelands, there's a portion that is marina portion. So it's a little tricky because it's called Marina Park. But let's just say marina portion is paid for using Tideland capital money, and the non-marina portion is paid for using either general fund money or facilities financing program money.
That's correct.
Okay. And so in this particular case, the developer fees of that are almost $8 million. That we've referenced at least, those have gone toward paying for Marina Park, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, and then the marina side of Marina Park, the Tidelands portion, that shows a negative fund balance right now in our budget because of two things, the dredging project and then the general fund loaning money into the capital fund for the purposes of constructing Marina Park, right?
Yes.
Okay. And the reason I pulled this is because two things. One, this is really complicated, so I want to at least make sure everyone understands how we're paying for our facilities, because it's not the easiest thing to track general fund money, FFP money, and Marina and Tidelands capital money. And in fact, I think our largest negative number inside our budget for our fund purposes is our capital fund, and I want people to understand why that is. But the second thing is, especially as we're talking about the general plan and the general plan amendment process at our study session, and then also coming up later tonight, it's really important to understand why we have nice things, right? I mean, the Marina Park doesn't get constructed without developer fee money. It just doesn't. And neither does anything else inside our city that the city has built in the last, I think, 10 years. So as we're talking about issues like that, it's really important that we continue to talk about the financial side of the general plan, as well as the impacts we have on our city, because the more we have that discussion, the better at least educated we are as a city on making choices that are to the benefit of all of our residents. And so I'd like to make sure that we continue to have this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Piotr.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a quick follow-up. So since the Marina Park's already paid for, in effect, when these monies go into the Marina Park Fund, it's really reimbursing the general fund? Or have these already been collected and this is just the report and we're not dealing with it? Because Marina Park was done over a year ago, right?
Yes. There's still some small amount of funds that need to be paid out, but it's largely done, yes.
So when these come in from development agreements, since we already paid all of our bills, we're really paying ourselves back into the general fund?
No, we're not. As was mentioned before, a certain portion came from the FFP and a certain portion came from the Tidelands Capital Fund. So those were the two main sources of funding for the project.
I'm just looking at it from a cash flow standpoint, right? The project's been done for over a year. This is a report for this year? Or was this the same fiscal year that we paid Marina Park?
This is for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2017, the 16-17 fiscal year.
And so we were able to pay during this fiscal year for Marina Park Direct. Never mind. Thanks.
Expenditure started in 2008, so it's been the project's been around for a while.
Yes, Councilwoman Dixon.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to echo what Councilmember O'Neill was making an excellent point, is that I think I heard along the way that the city has something like 73 parks, and all these parks have been paid for with development agreement money or development fee monies over the last several decades in lieu park funds and that type of thing. And Sunset Ridge Park, Sunset View Park, these are parks, and Marina Park, newer parks to our inventory of parks and green space. And it's good to recognize that investments in our community come from private investment as well. So thank you.
Is there a motion?
I move staff recommendation.
Second.
Any public comments on this item? Say none, let's return to the dais and vote.
Motion carries unanimously, 7-0.
Thank you, staff. Madam Clerk.
Public comments are invited on non-agenda items generally considered to be within the subject matter jurisdiction of the City Council. Speakers must limit comments to 3 minutes. Before speaking, please state your name for the record.
Thank you. Are there any public comments on non-agenda items? If so, please come forward. Sir, we heard you speak. Would you like to speak again?
Yep.
This time you're speaking on a non-agenda item, so.
Correct. So, kind of touched on it when I spoke earlier, but the reason why I want to speak again tonight was because I don't think I went to the full extent that my concern deserves. First and foremost, there are policies and procedures within the organization of the City of Newport that either restrict or restrain people from living freely and making their own free decisions, such that if someone, such as myself or someone else, decides that they do not want to be bothered or taken or given medical attention for whatever reason, it is within the right of myself or any other person within this state, within this country, that they are allowed to refuse those services. On the date which I mentioned earlier, which was the 12th, I was not given that opportunity. Rather, I was, I don't know how to say it. I don't want to say hassled. I don't want to say it, but these certain EMS people, emergency medical services people that showed up in response to the incident, decided that they were going to not listen to me, that they were going to do whatever they wanted to do. Okay? And when they did whatever they wanted to do, which included grabbing my arms, which included pulling me, which included telling me I couldn't leave, which included chasing me after I had told them, get away from me, and I started to walk away, which included calling the police to tackle me to the floor to put my face in the sand. Okay, these are all inappropriate things. This is why I wanted to bring it to your attention here. I don't know how to get in front of you all at once. I've been wondering all day, how do I get in front of you all at once? I went to your offices, you guys aren't available. I tried to talk to any of these management people, they're unavailable. They're not going to talk to me. I don't know why. It's within your responsibility to make sure that the citizens and the visitors of the city are protected and their rights are protected. Thank you.
Thank you. And repeat myself, City Manager Dave Kiff is available to speak with you this evening, as well as our police chief, John Lewis. Any other public comments on non-agenda items? How about oral reports from City Council on committee activities? Mr. O'Neill?
None.
Mr. Piotr? None. Ms. Dixon?
None.
Mr. Herdman?
None.
Mr. Avery?
None.
Mayor Pro Tem Duffield?
I have none.
I have none as well. On to current business, item 17, staff.
You have an option for a staff report on this. This is a curb cut project, a big one in mostly Mr. O'Neill's district.
I would like a brief one, please.
Good evening, Mayor, members of City Council. Very briefly, we're excited to be here in front of you tonight to present this construction contract to install over 200 curb ramps, also known as wheelchair ramps in the past too. This is very important to the city, to the Public Works Department, to keep with our Americans with Disabilities Act transition plan, where we build improvements to upgrade and improve access. So last year, you might remember, we had a one-time funding source of block grant funds, and this is a $1.2 million project. It includes the neighborhoods of Harborview, Newport Hills, East Bluff, Spyglass, and Corona Del Mar. And the important note here is these ramps do not currently exist. So these are new ramps to be installed in these neighborhoods, which will greatly improve access, and we're asking for your concurrence to approve the contract. Thank you.
I will note, Mr. Mayor, I must be going blind. This covers multiple districts, and Mr. O'Neill's is probably not the largest percentage, so I apologize.
No, it looks like District 5, Jeff.
Yes, Councilwoman Dixon.
Thank you, Mark. I just want to emphasize for Councilmember O'Neill and Councilmember Herdman's edification is the source of these funds primarily comes from the community development block grants that resulted from the public sale to private party of the Balboa Village Theater in my district. So we all support one another.
I can't believe money's actually coming from your district to the rest of us.
That's a good one. That's right. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments on this item?
Well, and I'd just like to point out that the community development block grant money comes from the federal government, so I'd like to thank all the people in the United States for this as well.
See, I'll pile on that too, in that it's federal money, but the ADA is a federal mandate, so it makes sense.
We're all good people.
Councilman Herdman.
And Councilwoman Dixon, you left Councilman Avery out of that comment because?
I see one curb.
Half a curb.
I will not want to deny you the credit, so thank you.
Okay.
Everybody, we all share.
Any other comments?
Move staff recommendation.
I'll second the motion.
Public comments on this item?
Who wants the money back?
Good evening, Mayor and Council members. I would just like to add one more thing about Council District 1 for Mayor Muldoon's information. District 1 contributes quite a bit of money to the residents of Newport Beach, city of Newport Beach, because a large majority of the people that come to visit Newport Beach come down to our beach, spend money here, and pay TOT tax here, and the restaurants, and District 1 includes not only the beach, but half of the harbor also. So quite a bit of money comes into the city of Newport Beach through District 1. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor Muldoon, members of the council, my name is Jim Mosier, and I would just like to point out, as I think I have before, although each of you council members lives in a district somewhere in the city, we do vote for you at large, so all of you equally represent the entire city. As to the ramps, I thought it was in the staff.
You guys are
report
taking
here.
this way too seriously.
Yes.
Go ahead, sir.
I would just like to point out that the ramps benefit not only the disabled, they represent young families with strollers and also bicycle riders who sometimes illegally want to go up for a moment on the sidewalk out of the street. And with funds different than this, the city is currently adding one of those on Irvine Avenue, which is very useful to me. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comments on this item? Seeing none, we have a motion and a second. Let's vote.
The motion carries unanimously, 7-0.
Staff, welcome back. For this item, we do have the time to read the change that we recently received, and if you would like, you can incorporate it in your presentation.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, we took your comments from the study session this afternoon. What staff did is we tried to go back and kind of craft a resolution that forms a blue ribbon committee. Again, taking everybody's feedback, so bear with me while I kind of walk through this. So the idea is to form a committee that will go back and review our existing and current general plan, then come back to the City Council with recommendations on what possible elements to update. The committee that we're proposing going forward is a committee of 10 members, 2 council members, 1 resident from each district, and 1 member from a commission or committee. Again, this is a kind of that whole discussion about a grassroots committee of just evaluating what we currently have before we kind of dive in to start a general plan update. Again, this is really just to study what we have and not start a general plan update process yet until that blue ribbon committee comes back to the City Council with some recommendations, which could be 1 or 2 years out.
And this is a Brown Act committee?
Yes, sir.
So that means all means will be publicly noticed.
Correct.
And it's open to the public as well. And are there any other restrictions? Because I want to offer my colleagues flexibility on the number of council members that can sit on this blue ribbon committee. I have requested up to 2 at this time, but I want to know if there's any problem with if a third member wanted to be a part of this committee. Mr. Harp?
If you'd like to have a third member as part of the committee, you probably should update it to be up to 3 council members. It's set up for up to 2 now, but you wouldn't have to put a third one on it. But that might be a modification you make to the proposed reso.
And it wouldn't change the way this committee operated for the sake of Brown Act?
No,
Okay.
it wouldn't.
Excellent. Councilman O'Neill?
So given that so one thing, Simone, I personally actually do view this as the first step toward a general plan update. So I do, in my mind, we are starting the process. At least it's a little slower than perhaps we had talked about at study session, but still, I do think that this is, to Councilman Herdman's comments toward the mayor, I do view this as starting that process. But the second thing is, I would really like to have a little bit of time to digest this. I mean, I'd like to continue it, frankly, to our next meeting, and allow a little bit more comment on it and digesting it and trying to figure out the right composition on it. Anyway, those are my thoughts, and I'll make that motion later. Yeah, I move continuance of this to the next meeting with a staff
I'll second.
With the staff recommendation being either this particular resolution or a modified resolution based on staff's next thoughts or thoughts between now and the next staff report.
Yes, Councilman Herdman.
Given the amount of people that were here during the study session and have left, basically, I see very few people out there that were here earlier. I think this is, Councilman O'Neill's motion is very appropriate. Let's give it a couple of more weeks. Let those people that were here earlier today take a look at the composition of this committee and get back to us as our representatives, and I think we'll be in a better position a couple of weeks from now to see if this is okay with the community. All right, thank you.
Any other requests to speak from the dais? Okay, see none. Public comments?
Mayor Muldoon, members of the council, my name is Jim Mosier, and I definitely agree with the sentiments I've heard from the council. I may myself be in some way responsible for this resolution, but we heard this afternoon there's no rush about this. And this is really not the way government should be done. This is clearly not ready for prime time. You have a proposal before you. It has not been signed off resolution. The city attorney has not endorsed it as to being legally correct. There's no cost estimate connected to this. Is it going to involve consultants? What's it about? It's flawed in many ways. The committee will sunset upon initiation of a general plan update. That presupposes there will be, as Councilman O'Neill said, it should sunset when the committee makes a recommendation. It explains who the members are. It doesn't explain how you become a member, who makes the appointments. That's completely missing here. There's a sentence I totally don't understand. The mayor's appointees shall have the discretion on whom to appoint to the committee, which appointment shall be made at an open and public city council meeting. I totally don't understand what that means. And as to the composition of the committee, if you want my quick opinion of it, I would have no council members at all on it, because if I was a council member, what I would be seeking is the community's view of this. I would want something completely independent from the council and the city staff as you could find, to review our general plan and then come back to you with a recommendation that you could take, leave, do whatever you want with, but at least you would have an independent analysis of what needs to be done or should be done about the general plan and how it would be a good way for this city to go about doing it. Thank you.
Please hold your applause. You know, it's kind of silly, Jim. All you have is negative things to say about our staff. Our staff tried very hard to accommodate your idea. They're very open listening to you, as we all are. And I think, staff, thank you for trying to do this to appease those who came here. We're trying to work with you all. And, nobody's perfect. Yes.
Nancy Gardner. I was also here this afternoon. And I was very excited at the idea of a general plan update. I was on the General Plan Advisory Committee. And that committee did everything. The General Plan, GPUC wasn't the one that created the vision. It was GPAC. And for me, that is one of the keys that I think is a reason to start this sooner rather than later. Because in the last 10 or 11 years, there's been some demographic changes in our city. We've got a whole bunch more of Councilman O'Neill's generation and my generation fewer. And I think it was just very much the opposite in that way. And the younger people probably have a slightly different vision of what they want to see in this city. Not a negative, that's not necessarily negative, but a different vision, different perspectives, different emphases than maybe those of us who were very much involved in the first plan of an older generation. And the thing that struck me also was Councilman Herdman's thought that it's too soon because we have divisions. And to me, that is one of the biggest reasons to start it sooner rather than later. We look at our country right now, whether we're talking nationally or at our city level, and we see these divisions. And what we see is each side hunkering down. We're all listening to our own little radio stations or watching our own little television programs, and we're not talking to each other. And that is not how we resolve something. And so it seems to me the sooner that we have a really representative committee looking at the future of our city, we get those different groups in the same room, we have to respond to each other. We have to listen to each other. And that's the way we're going to resolve these kinds of differences within our city, not by keeping ourselves separate. So I know that sitting through the afternoon, they said, let's slow down. But I think there's some real reason for going ahead. And I thank you, Mayor Muldoon, for at least trying to start this.
Tim Stokes, Santa Ana Heights. Mayor Kevin Muldoon, a.k.a. Cowboy Kevin. Bernadette got you on a horse this week. I'm so proud. Nancy was the only other council person to get him on a horse. And by the way, my daughter's at university, so I've got a thoroughbred in my backyard if you ever want to just saddle up again, okay? Just from levity here. No. I applaud the Blue Ribbon Committee. I think our community has worked very hard to be somewhat divisive with built environment that we're trying to create as a city in Newport Beach. I applaud this type of structure to see what the general plan needs to be. I think, that we need trust to come back to the city, we need consensus to come back to the city, and we need a balance to come back to our city. So I think something like this appropriately addresses it. So thank you to staff for putting this through. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please. All right, seeing none, we'll bring it back to the dais. It seems like this, although we appreciate staff rushing to get this and being responsive to the residents, that perhaps it's better to have this come back at a next council meeting. I think that's probably the consensus on this dais as well. So I will make a motion to continue the item. Either the next council meeting, if we think we come to a consensus with a couple council members, or at a subsequent meeting, probably in the new year.
Mayor, Councilmember O'Neill had already made that motion.
Thank you. So I'm sure you said it as well as I did, so I will second it. If it's probably seconded already too, actually it is. So.
Sorry, council members, is Mr. O'Neill, is your timing the same as the mayor's? Actually, the next meeting versus?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Next meeting.
Kind of like the mayor's more, but that's all right. You never know what happens.
Oh,
I'll go with what obviously we'll do what you want.
It just gave flexibility. That's basically in the new year if they can't get it by next meeting. It's the only difference.
Okay, I modify my motion to that timing.
That's okay with the second.
All right, let's vote.
Motion carried unanimously, 7-0.
Madam Clerk.
A motion to reconsider the vote on any action taken by the city council at either this meeting or the previous meeting may be made only by one of the council members who voted with the prevailing side.
Any motions to reconsider? See none, we are adjourned.
Actually, before you adjourn, we have those two closed sessions.
That's right, we do. You go first, and then I'll adjourn.
Well, then I'm adjourning.
The city council will be adjourning to closed session to discuss labor negotiations with the Newport Beach Lifeguard Management Association, as well as one matter of existing litigation, which is the City of Newport Beach versus United States Federal Aviation Administration, both on the regular agenda as items 4A and D. You have to come back out, though, to the meeting to report out before we can actually end the meeting.
So we will return to adjourn in the memory of two beloved deceased from Newport Beach, and we will also be pouring out what happens in closed session.
Okay, go back to closed session.
Reconvening our regular planned, whatever this is, city council session, November 14th, 2017. City Attorney, is there a report?
There's no closed session report this evening.
Thank you. On a serious note, we're going to be adjourned in the memory of Craig Kennedy, a member of Rotary here locally, and someone that I had the pleasure and honor of getting to know, who was a longtime Newport Beach resident and a tremendous volunteer in our community, and of Gary D. Johnston, who Councilwoman Dixon is going to read about.
Yes, Gary D. Johnson passed away on October 17th. He was born in Oklahoma, and his family moved to Los Angeles while he was a young child. He grew up to be a star athlete at Westchester High School and went on to play minor league baseball for 4 years with the Chicago Cubs. He graduated from UCLA and began a 30-year career with Arthur Young and Company. He rose through the ranks until becoming the managing partner of the firm's San Diego and Orange County offices. Throughout his career, he was actively involved in many professional and community organizations, served as vice president and director of California Society of CPAs, president of the Long Beach Orange County chapter of CPAs, and chairman of the board of United Way of Orange County. He was also instrumental in establishing the Orange County Community Foundation and served the organization as a director and first governor. An avid sports fan, Gary loved attending Angel games, visiting baseball stadiums across the country, and spring training in Arizona, and as a member of St. Andrew's Presbyterian Church. He's survived by his wife of 56 years, Cassia, sons Greg and Glenn, and grandsons Graham, Grant, and Chad. I'm honored to speak in his memory today. He was an everyday presence on Lido Isle, where I live, where he lived, his family lived. He will be missed. He circumnavigated Lido Isle on foot every day for many, many, many years. And those who didn't know Gary but saw him every day miss him greatly. And I just wanted to honor his presence. He meant a lot to all of us on Lido. Thank you.
Thank you. We are adjourned.
Wonderful job.